This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people that had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in will never let the true facts come about boards to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader? Don't remember his name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
now these people are in very high positions, yeah?
Yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 71. I am your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today, we are going to circle back to one of our regular topics and do kind of an update, a little bit of how we did with the QAnon thing. But I think, it's not just any update, because we're recording this on Thursday, May 20th. And I think we kind of made a last-minute audible. And because this has been all over the news in a way that I think even the most diehard grotto heads or SJ heads would find folks have found a little bit alarming.
We're being blue-beamed.
We're being blue-beamed, basically. Folks, we're being blue-beamed. It's all over the news. I put on, cable news every night this week and, expected to see a lot of typical shit talking about the big lie or January 6th or this or that or heroic Liz Cheney getting, demoted from her base leadership position, blah, blah, blah. But actually this week, everybody from CIA officer Anderson Vanderbilt, Cooper, to Don Lemon, to I think Chris Hayes on MSNBC and Tucker Carlson on Fox News has been singing from the rafters about UFO disclosure.
Yes. You were just telling me about, I had heard in the air that Obama had commented and weighed in and in sort of the hubbub around this topic that's been happening. And I'm still, just simmering a little bit in the outrage that Obama, of all things, this week, while, Gaza is burning, families are, buried under rubble, he's no longer president. So, of all things, he comes out and is like, well, there's some objects out there that we don't know quite what they are, and so I think it's hard to say.
On the Late Show, naturally, I think.
Yeah,
I think he did. I remember.
How dare you? Of all
well, it's
things,
not the first time. It's not the first time that Gaza burned and he went about his business and didn't do shit.
No,
right?
it's true. But I mean,
he was president.
Well, but he's not president anymore. Jimmy Carter, who is not perfect by any stretch, he came out and said something in his post-presidency, and you'd think Obama, this great beacon of hope, a Muslim himself, just a disappointment like all the fucking Muslim leaders that we have,
I'm looking at a video right now, and I'm not seeing that Wahhabi ring on his finger, so big disappointment.
Yeah, big disappointment.
Yeah, Alex Jones did say he wore a Wahhabi ring. Secret Service confirmed it, folks.
Yes, so I'm sure he still wears the Wahhabi ring. I assume that it's, one of those agate rings that they wear. Or that's a Shia thing. So I don't know.
Okay. Maybe it's hard to tell, but I am looking. This video started auto-playing on CNN, and he's looking at me with that liar's grin. When I went into office, I asked about UFOs. Let's see what his direct quote was. He says, the truth is that when I came into office, I asked, I was like, all right, is there a lab somewhere where we're keeping the alien specimens and spaceship? And, they did a little bit of research, and the answer was no. And, then he kept saying, oh, what is true, and I'm actually being serious here, is that there's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory. They did not have an easily explainable pattern. And so, I think that people still take seriously trying to investigate and figure out what that is. Okay, Obama. Okay. And, he's kind of doing the same shtick that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have done in the past of talking about, I remember Bill Clinton got asked by, it's usually on a late night show, they bust his, I think even Obama himself may have been asked by Jimmy Kimmel some years back, maybe right after he left office, about the UFOs, and they always give a kind of cheeky answer, and it was like, well, it wouldn't be the first time they kept something from a president, but I did ask them, and they said they got nothing, but I don't know if I believe them. And then, of course, as we'll get into, I think in today's episode, one of the common threads between both Obama and Clinton is they had as their chief of staff Mr. John Podesta, who is at this point, more than confirmed, 100% confirmed UFO freak, basically.
Yeah, he instigated a lot of this, or he was the main pusher of it from the inside, I think, or within the government. He would be organizing this stuff, putting the stuff together, demanding that things be earmarked to investigate this. Yeah,
and actually, the Podesta group, or I think as it was known, Podesta Mattoon, was basically instrumental in, I think at one point, suing NASA to get some kind of like UFO stuff released. And we're going to probably dive into an extremely interesting and very illuminating, a kind of unintentionally illuminating article from the New Yorker that I think was from April of this year. That is another one of these kind of, it's a part of a genre that I think we've started seeing since December 2017?
I don't remember the month, but it was definitely 2017 that the first New York Times UFO article came out that was like, the Pentagon's been investigating UFOs, et cetera, et cetera. That was 2017. And
yes, and that was the first time that I remember.
Like, whoa, like UFOs are real?
And so that was, after years of the X-Files and wacky UFO gray culture and ancient aliens and all of these things that did exist prominently in pop culture, but always were sequestered from like serious scientists, and their inquiries into this phenomenon. They basically just wouldn't talk about it. As Chomsky would say, just not significant enough to merit attention.
There was a build-up. I think this is very odd because this is very odd because there has been, I think it's important to emphasize this because I was reflecting on this, in the midst of the massive blue beam psyop that's being foisted upon us and is unfolding. I don't know, as we record this, they've said that they are going to release some big thing soon, like
in
some
June.
Big new
They're required
information.
to, allegedly.
Yeah, I guess it's an FOIA thing, but anyway, so it has been a long build-up because for a while, there was the X-Files, which was the big thing, but the History Channel used to be a little bit different, there was like American Pickers or whatever. I don't really know if that was on before this stuff, but you get my
no, that
like,
was that
Wild
kind of
West shit,
It was kind of contemporaneous and afterwards, and actually,
gradually it became all about UFOs. UFOs became like these boomer like cable networks like Sci-Fi, History, TLC, like Travel Channel, like everything, and now the cable news networks are just pumping into like UFOs into these households. I'm just saying.
Well,
it's like
actually,
a non-stop UFO drip.
I'm gonna give I'm gonna give a slight correction there because I do remember kind of tuning in and out of the History Channel, and my dad, who some may know is a boomer, was a big fan in the '90s, and I think it was even. I recall it even being made kind of like a joke on The Sopranos in some of the early seasons of what everyone used to call the History Channel when it first came out. They call it the Hitler Channel. Why? Because there was so much footage of Nazi Germany that was the first thing the History Channel did, was basically just have an endless stream of World War II documentaries, and particularly ones that could make use of archival footage of the Third Reich. And there's actually a reason for that, because I believe the main archival source that History Channel was, I guess, either had the rights to or was in partnership with was the Hearst archives. of William Randolph Hearst and his news organization, which basically extensively, some might even say enthusiastically, covered the Third Reich from many different angles, and thus had a lot of footage. And so, in a way, I know somebody on Twitter pointed this out years ago, that it's weird that the History Channel started out as this kind of dumping ground of Nazi B-roll. And we're like, let's just put like Hitler stuff on TV. And people that even liked it would kind of comment on it. It's a little weird how into the Hitler thing they are. And I guess, you could either say, because that's the archival footage they had the rights to, and just, take these Nazi lemons and squeeze it into cheap TV lemonade. Or you could also maybe read a little more into that, of like just seeding these images back in to cable TV of like Nazis. And then I think in the 2000s is when they started to gravitate away from the kind of World War II stuff, and they simultaneously kind of branched off into like reality type stuff, which is like, the Master of the Blade, whatever that thing is, where like they make swords and like chop up a mannequin.
Forged in Fire, hilarious show.
Yes, Forged in Fire.
Show.
And then Hoarders, another very weird. I think Hoarders was on maybe History, but there was all kinds of stuff like pawn shops.
Hoarders was TLC.
TLC is the most kind of sicko. They do like
Antiques Roadshow type stuff on History Channel, but
then I remember
I do recall
around
that it was Hitler. And there were some, like, things like In Search Of on certain channels like that. I don't think that was on History. Discovery did some stuff during the 90s in, like, the Age of the X-Files, but it really amped up, I think the thing that really started it was Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi, really. But then from there, and then Ancient Aliens was a huge hit for History Channel. And from there, it just ballooned.
And you know what? Okay, so if we're going to be bluebeamy, critical paranoid here, I think I remember the time when Ancient Aliens came out and became super popular. It was kind of in the wake of the recession in 2009 and 2010.
Yeah,
and I remember the first time hanging out with a couple, with a coworker, I think, and we were like watching stuff. Like in, there were a few of us there like watching stuff, and I think like an ad for Ancient Aliens came on, and they were like, "Yo, do you watch Ancient Aliens?" And I'm like, oh, yeah, no, I've seen it. It's like a wild thing. But they kind of were like, yeah, what do you think? Do you believe in aliens? And they were like, they really believed, like, Ancient Aliens in a kind of, like, serious way that, like, threw me off a little bit. Because I was like, this show's so wacky. Like, I am kind of curious about, UFO stuff. But, like, that crazy Greek guy who literally became, like, a Reddit meme and all that stuff. Like, aliens, it was simultaneously shitcoding it, but also, like, seeding it into the consciousness more. And on top of that, what's important about kind of 2009, 2010 is that was leading up to the great, let us not forget, the great 2012 Mayan apocalypse hype, which was a very big thing. It's a very big thing in those years, and very big in the kind of new agey world, whether we're talking about kind of ayahuasca, like psychedelic people, or every kind of stripe. I think even our favorite Q suspect, Lisa Kleypier, was a huge promoter of the 2012 apocalyptic like vibration ascendancy, whatever thing. I think I found an interview of her with like Barbara Marx Hubbard, maybe talking about it, and so that kind of lent, the Ancient Aliens thing. I think I recall correctly, and they also had other shows that were just about kind of like Ancient Aliens was really about the ancient astronaut theory, and that in all these ancient cultures they have clues, and I think it did definitely play and hype up the 2012 Mayan apocalypse thing. But then when that didn't happen, I don't know. I think that they maybe started to. I think they still have a lot of UFO stuff on History Channel, but I feel like maybe it kind of moved elsewhere. And then in the kind of mid-2010s is when we started to see the earliest seeds of this new push that is now taking over, is everywhere, on CNN, Fox, MSNBC, everywhere you go, in the New York Times,
there's
the New
still
Yorker.
A ton of UFO stuff on In fact, there was like a show on History Channel that was just like To the Stars Academy, like their own thing, like Hunt for the Skinwalker or something. They did a whole show about Skinwalker Ranch. They've done all this stuff. There's still all over TV. They have this stuff. Like the paranormal reality racket is huge, and there's a lot of ghost stuff in that as well. But definitely, like UFOs remain a pretty big thing on all those I think they're all connected. I think that they all are like subsidiaries of the same thing, like Discovery, History, TLC, Travel.
Actually, just as a fun side note, this is also relevant to just this week, because guess what just happened? The kind of umbrella company of Discovery, which I think does own a bunch of those channels, has just announced a merger with our favorite media conglomerate, Warner Media. So the the mobbed up Skinwalker, puppet man corporation of Warner Media, which is owned by AT&T. So we're going right back to kind of the telecom source that has recaptured this mafia company that took over a chunk of the movie and music business. Now they are merging with this Discovery kind of octopus of historical UFO-y reality content. So I don't know what that, really is going to look like, but it is interesting, So, but everything is kind of, I don't know, coming into the mainstream now, in a way, I think we can say, this, and it's been a long, something of a long time coming. I mean, you maybe even could look back to the X-Files, basically popularizing these things in a really big way in the 1990s. And is still a huge cultural touchstone for so many people. But now we're getting to this point where it's out in the open, and you have these factions of kind of disclosure proselytizers that have much more legit kind of credentials than we're used to getting from various
and
people,
all
ufologists.
As you mentioned, all the cable news freaks like Chris Hayes, Don Lemon, all coming out and being like, oh, I don't know, I mean, it just seems like there's something to it. I mean, it's crazy. Why isn't anyone more excited about this? It's just like, yeah. Stop.
I don't know. Why are you suddenly so excited about it? Because it is quite a ontological
disruption. It's an ontological pivot. Yeah, it is an ontological disruption on a massive scale. And no one seems to be quite reckoning with that possibility. Maybe let's get into this Leslie Kean New Yorker article, because I think this is very indicative of that.
Let us do that, because Leslie Kean, we'll get into. She pops up in this eventually. Is somebody that I had never really heard of before, but hits on so many things that we've been talking about lately, even beyond the realm of UFOs. It's just, this article kind of, I don't know, maybe tells on itself a little bit in ways that are fascinating, especially for people who've just heard the episode. I won't spoil it. Let's just dive in. Where do you want to begin?
Well, I think it is important to note that this starts talking about Stephen Greer, and it kind of sets the more sober-minded disclosure people, such as Leslie Kean and To the Stars and that whole milieu. Even within To the Stars, they're making distinctions where it's some of them are a little bit too wacky. Certain are sober-minded.
Certain pop-punk stars.
Yeah. Right. Yes. But it starts off talking about Stephen Greer. It gives a little rundown of him. It says. Greer's, quote, executive summary was woolly, but discerning readers could find within it answers to many of the most frequently asked questions about UFOs, assuming, as Greer did, that UFOs are helmed by extraterrestrials. Why are they so elusive? Because the aliens are monitoring us. Why? Because they are discomforted by our aspiration to, quote-unquote, weaponize space. This is, the standard stuff that we talked about in our episode of Stephen Greer. Have we shot at them? Yes. Should we shoot at them? No. Really? Yes. Why not? They're friendly. How do we know? Obviously, any civilization capable of routine interstellar travel could terminate our civilization in a nanosecond if that was their intent.
Just
that
like Dogman.
We are still breathing. Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking that, just like Dogman. If they wanted to, that we are still breathing the free air of Earth is abundant testimony to the non-hostile nature of these ET civilizations. One obvious question seems not to have occurred to Greer. Why, if these spacecraft are so advanced, do they allegedly crash all the time? Well, fair. I guess they do, but why, do they? Because why can't we see it? Anyway, whatever.
So that's but they do kind of lightly Stephen Greer pretty quickly, and that's when they bring in this character who I'm sure I've seen her name before, but it's not somebody I've really logged or looked into as, this is a prominent person in the mix.
on the show before, but what's great about her is that she's a girl boss. You know, she is the girl boss of Project Bluebeam. She's here to, you know, bring that energy and lean in to the question of aliens. And if you're if you're critical of her work, like, you really, in a way, the aliens are victims of, like, if you are dismissive of the aliens, like, that's sexism in a way. I think, you know,
and you know, she's
everyone's circling the wagons around this narrative. That's kind of
it's problematic, and you know, on top of that, she is a serious journalist. So she believes in the facts. She doesn't, you know, basically, when some of these people start just going off about talking about, you know, little green men or Pleiadians or reptoids or something like that, that's kind of where she jumps off. But she's also not totally ruling out the possibility of that. It's just that she feels very, and you know, I guess this kind of makes sense, that, you know, you got to start with the low-hanging fruit that people can kind of, like, you can kind of pin down a little bit, at least with personal testimonies and eyewitnesses and things like that, and start, you know, from the bottom up. Don't just jump to, yes, they're 12-foot tall Nordic aliens and they invented the pyramids, blah, blah, blah. You know, like, chill out a little bit, which is okay, understandable. But, you know, it says here that she had been an independent investigative journalist and a novice UFO researcher who had worked with Stephen Greer. But when she was, I guess, at the press club thing, she watched the proceedings with unease. She had recently published an article in the Boston Globe about a new omnibus of compelling evidence concerning UFOs, and she couldn't understand why a speaker would make an unsupported assertion about alien cadavers when he could be talking about hard data. To Kean, the corpus of genuinely baffling reports deserves scientific scrutiny, regardless of how you felt about aliens. Quote, there were some good people at that conference, but some of them were making outrageous, grandiose claims, Kean told me. I knew then that I had to walk away. Greer hoped that members of the media would cover the event, and they did, with frolicsome derision. He also hoped that Congress would hold hearings. By all accounts, it did not. And so, I mean, I guess that was,
Well, he was obviously talking over Leslie Kean and everything. So this is a great description. Okay. Leslie Kean is a self-possessed woman with a sensible demeanor and a nimbus of curly graying hair. She lives alone in a light-filled corner apartment near the northern extreme of Manhattan, where on the wall behind her desk there is a framed black and white image that looks like a sonogram of a frisbee. The photograph was given to her, along with chain of custody documentation, by contacts in the Costa Rican government. In her estimation, it is the finest image of a UFO ever made public. The first time I visited, she wore a black blazer over a t-shirt advertising The Phenomenon, a documentary from 2020 with strikingly high production values in a genre known for grainy footage of dubious provenance. There was plenty of that in the movie, but whatever.
Yeah.
Kean is stubborn, but unassuming. Like, you know, it's not like they had a good high-resolution video, but anyway. Kean is stubborn but unassuming, and she tends to speak of the impact of, quote, the Time story and the new cycle of UFO attention it has inaugurated, as if she had not been its principal instigator. She told me, when the New York Times story came out, there was a sense of, this is what the UFO people have wanted forever. Kean is always assiduously polite towards the UFO people, although she stands apart from the ufological mainstream. It's not necessarily that what Greer was saying was wrong. Maybe there have been visits by extraterrestrials since 1947, she said. It's that you had to be strategic about what you say to be taken seriously. You don't put out someone talking about alien bodies, even if it might be true. Nobody was ready for that. They didn't even know that UFOs were real. Kean is certain that UFOs are real. Everything else, what they are, why they're here, why they never alight on the White House lawn, is speculation. Yeah, so...
Well, yeah, that's a good point to note, just for anybody, that famous December 2017 New York Times article, again, like I said, I wasn't fully aware, but she was one of the co-authors of that. So she very much is in the middle of this official, you know, mainstream disclosure, kind of with a small d, of this stuff.
Yes. She still covers the beat for the New York Times, I think. The UFO beat is, like, I think she still writes on it for them. Yes. And it's... Yeah, so you can see already how, like, wow, you know, this credible Manhattan journalist it's very different. You know, she's not part of these UFO people. You know, this is much more. She's much more authoritative. You know, she's one of us, right? So
and
yes,
yet, I'm just staring at this one paragraph here that I think
it gets really
I think it made
good.
you send me a lot of red siren
screen
emojis.
caps. Yes, red siren emojis. Yes, yeah. First a couple thinking emojis, and then a red siren emoji.
Can I do the honors here?
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, by all means.
So good.
Yeah. Okay.
We're going into like real bizarro like Pynchon territory right now. All right. So who is Leslie Kean? The article says, and I credit them for being as upfront as they were. Kean grew up in New York City, a descendant of one of the nation's oldest political dynasties. Her grandfather, Robert Winthrop Kean, served 10 terms in Congress. He traced his ancestry on his father's side to John Kean, a South Carolina delegate to the Continental Congress, and on his mother's to John Winthrop, one of the Puritan founders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. She speaks of her family's legacy in rather abstract terms, except when discussing the abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison, her grandfather's great-grandfather, whom she regards as an inspiration. Her uncle is Thomas Kean, who served 2 terms as New Jersey's governor and went on to chair the 9/11 Commission. Kean attended the Spence School and went... Yeah, I know, right? Like, okay, yeah. So, but then, okay, we're not done. We're not done. Kean attended the Spence School and went to college at Bard. She has a modest family income and spent her early adult years as, quote, a spiritual seeker. After helping to found a Zen center in upstate New York, she worked as a photographer at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. In the late 1990s, after a visit to Burma to interview political prisoners, she stumbled into a career in investigative journalism. She took a job at KPFA, a radio station in Berkeley, as a producer and on-air host for Flashpoints, a left-wing drive-time news program where she covered wrongful convictions, the death penalty, and other criminal justice issues. And I guess in 1999 is when she kind of got into, somebody sent her a French military report about UFOs, blah, blah, blah. But hold up right there, just like, wow, okay, KPFA strikes again. Like...
Yeah.
How do these people just
amazing.
end up? How do these people from these certain pedigrees just end up flocking to KPFA like moths to a flame? I like mothman to a flame. I don't like the velvet fog fucking calls out to them, and they just end up. Also, they kind of soft pedal the thing about Burma, but I noticed that was like her first book, and yeah, Burma's Revolution of the Spirit, the struggle for democratic freedom and dignity. Sus. I'm sorry, sus. That sounds like some CIA. Fucking National Endowment for Democracy bullshit that somebody would be up to.
Well, that's part of Bluebeam is that we have to destroy Islam, so that people can accept the new religion. So obviously she's a big fan of everything that's going on in Myanmar. One would assume that
Yeah, it was actually originally published in 1985. I don't know exactly the timeline of the conflict in Burma if there was a Cold War proxy conflict in the 80s, but at the same time, interesting that basically, she starts off like gallivanting around Southeast Asia and also opening Zen centers and being a spiritual seeker. Not really that unusual, I think, for somebody from such a pedigree family, but then just kind of stumbles right into that KPFA job and becomes a radio host, like just boom, like that. And then kind of stumbles into this UFO beat that she has been able to basically kind of finesse into a full-time gig at the New York Times, and is like the official person that, with all, as this article states, like has the
There's a hilarious
highest
picture
credibility.
Of Aung San. There's a hilarious picture of Aung San Suu Kyi on the cover of this Burma Revolution of Spirit thing.
Is he?
It's a she. She's the.
Oh, sorry,
the
she. Was she the one who was just deposed?
Or was the president of Burma recently? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
So she was an activist for a long time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And what was I forget? I confess to not. You've been to Myanmar, right? I mean, that's
yes, I have.
Not to be super sus, but yeah. So I mean, you can go to Myanmar and not be sus, but I'm not super well versed with kind of the factions and stuff. The most recent kind of military coup, I'd heard all kinds of shit about it. Was it thought that was sort of backed by China as a way to kind of curb U.S. influence in Myanmar? Or was it vice versa?
Yes, that's what I've been hearing, but I honestly haven't been following it super closely myself. I have heard that, they're, really honestly, this is bad, but my main understanding of it is from people being like, you got to stomp those jungle trots, so from the tankies on Twitter,
I see.
talking about how they need to kill the jungle trots. And China needs to come in and the base junta has to destroy the jungle trots. But yeah, I think that I'm pretty sure that it's perceived. I mean, the U.S. did act very concerned about the coup and everything, so I assume that it's not. They're not framing it as like this is a base democratic thing.
No,
really,
they're not.
It they were more down with Aung San Suu Kyi, although I assume that they did lightly criticize her when she kind of just sat there and let a genocide of the Rohingya happen.
That's interesting.
I guess
really
just anything about it.
Well, I guess
when I went there, they were kind of trying to open up, be open to tourists and everything. And Obama had just visited there, and it's let's join the community of nations, and everything will be great if you just open up and give us all your resources, and everything will be fine.
Well, also, okay.
Make sure you watch out for UFOs because there's something going on there. Goodbye.
I'm just gonna throw this in there.
Enjoy your genocide. Just watch out for UFOs.
No. Well, I mean, he would know from his stepdad in Indonesia in the 1960s, and his mom, who was working for the Ford Foundation in Indonesia, a little thing about genocide, wouldn't he? And about wiping out communists. Yeah, he would. He might have learned a thing.
Well, you know what? But it is actually worth noting. They kind of do hint at it when they say that she helped found a Zen center in upstate New York, and that she was a spiritual seeker, but. All of her career really does lead very naturally to this current thing that she's into of UFOs. Because KPFA, with the milieu of Alan Watts, Burma, the whole Gandhi thing of Burma, Aung San Suu Kyi being this great inspiration to everyone, even though
I'm getting up to speed right now, and I think I'm starting to notice a little bit of a common, pattern here. Basically that, I'm not defending, the base junta necessarily, but, it's worth noting that between 1974 and 1988, Burma was, the Socialist Republic of the Union of Burma that was basically run by a socialist military dictatorship or junta under the Burma Socialist Program Party. And so basically it was the ruling party from 1962 to 1988 when there was a big, the pro-democracy 8888 uprising in 1988. Okay.
Well, Myanmar,
just a lot of 88s there.
I mean, there are a lot of people like this in South Asia generally, but Myanmar is one place where I met someone who was just decked out in Nazi regalia and just smilingly told me that he admired Hitler and loved him.
Wow.
And I tried to explain why Hitler was bad, but he did not seem to quite get it. So I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things, the Wikipedia, part thing under the Burmese Way to Socialism article, says that the Burmese Way to Socialism was characterized by isolationism, totalitarianism, superstition, xenophobia, xenophobia, and a rejection of Cold War politics. And basically, they said, it was disastrous, by scholars called it disastrous, and all these other things. But it is worth noting that, it sounds like they had a very kind of eclectic nationalist, not national socialist, but a kind of isolationist form of kind of socialism, and also with a strong anti-Western kind of influence. And so one of the things they did, though, that I think is kind of relevant is they said right here under impact, the effects of the Burmese Way to Socialism were multifold, affecting the economy, educational standards, and living standards of the Burmese people. Here we go. Foreign aid organizations, like the American-based Ford Foundation and Asia Foundation, as well as the World Bank, were no longer allowed to operate in the country. Only permitted was aid from a government-to-government basis. In addition, the teaching of the English language was reformed and moved to secondary schools, whereas previously it had started as early as kindergarten. The government also implemented extensive visa restrictions for Burmese citizens, especially when their destinations were Western countries. Instead, the government sponsored the travel of students, scientists, and technicians to the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe in order to receive training and to, quote, counter years of Western influence in the country. Similarly, visas for foreigners were limited to just 24 hours.
Furthermore, freedom of expression, freedom of press was extensively restricted, blah, blah, blah. But hold up, though. I mean, interesting. The Ford Foundation got kicked out of Burma by this isolationist government, and even the Asia Foundation, which is super kind of spooked up and was, I think, backed openly by the U.S. government. It literally was the predecessor. The Committee for a Free Asia was founded in 1951 as a CIA operation and is ostensibly no longer affiliated with the CIA. Do you remember when we were in the DPRK and they brought us to their English language library and they flipped through a bunch of books and they had like a stories from Shakespeare book that was published by the Asia Foundation?
Stories from
and they just kind of showed
Shakespeare.
this, look,
weird.
like Asia Foundation, San Francisco, and like showed it to us. It was kind of, I almost thought like later I was like, why didn't the DPRK guide know that like the Asia Foundation is sus? Like, I don't know, but I guess a book's a book. But anyways, I don't know, banning the Ford Foundation, and then she's from this like blue blood Yankee family, and then ends up going to Burma in the mid '80s.
And basically, her book seems like it was all about promoting Aung San Suu Kyi, who, like, whatever you want to say about like the previous government, which I'm sure had its own abuses, like she was this great hero, westernizer, democratic activist, but what she ended up doing was just like totally letting a genocide happen, trying to cover it up, getting angry about being interviewed by a Muslim, about the genocide, refusing to give Rohingya citizenship, just generally sucking. So she propped up someone who definitely ultimately was not based at all in the sense of based as good.
Well, there we go again.
She was
with
definitely
kind
based
of,
in the ironic sense, yes.
Yeah. There we go again with kind of these people that are swinging for the fences when it comes to kind of, turning our ontologies of reality in the world upside down, talking about UFOs. But when they're actually on the ground doing stuff, when they're kind of like cutting their teeth in the world, they do it just like, Leslie Kean's very good friend who gets mentioned in this New Yorker article, Christopher Mellon, a scion of the Mellon banking dynasty, ended up as like the undersecretary of intelligence at the Pentagon in the 1990s. And, but he's the enlightened, chill dude that we should trust to like tell us everything about the UFOs. This like creepy Pentagon spook, or Luis Elizondo or... Tom DeLonge, for that matter. Just a bunch of sus weirdos who were doing sus imperialist shit, probably, to a certain extent. I mean, maybe Tom DeLonge was just, hanging out in the Nimitz, playing USO shows right before a Tic Tac UFO showed up, apparently. It could be just a coincidence. But they were also helping to track down Saddam Hussein, so I guess they're not uninvolved, right? they had, remember Mark Hoppus had that whole plot about they're going to, like, triangulate the audio, like, recordings around a rack and shit. So, I mean, these people, and then, the Podestas, like, do I trust the fucking Pizzagate ass Podestas? No, but they're going to tell us like the open secret, or like weirdo Mormon, probably mobbed up, Senator Harry Reid. The list goes on. How could I trust any of these people?
Robert Bigelow, also Mormon.
Robert Bigelow. Oh, is he Mormon?
There was a Mormon who owned Skinwalker Ranch for a while, but maybe Robert Bigelow isn't.
I mean, there's a lot of Mormons in Las Vegas and Nevada, so it wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah.
There was a Mormon who owned Skinwalker Ranch for a while, but maybe, I guess he isn't exactly
It was
Mormon.
in Utah. Okay, yeah. Well, he'll come up later. I listened to his interview recently on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah, I listened to a little bit of that where he was going on about NDEs and automatic writing and stuff, but I had to skim around just because I find both him and Joe Rogan to be quite insufferable, so it was hard to listen to the entire thing, but I made an effort.
One thing about Bigelow is he sniffs kind of habitually the way like Slavoj Žižek does, which is a little weird. Not to be ableist or whatever, but he did a lot of like double sniffs, like while he was like in between talking and stuff. That just, it's like he was a cokehead or something, but he didn't really seem like he was on coke. But it was that kind of thing. It was a little bit funny, but
I guess Brandon Fugel was the Mormon guy who owned it, and he did do the History Channel. He was like in the History Channel show about Skinwalker Ranch there a while ago. He was the Mormon guy who owned Skinwalker Ranch for a while.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I just want to say, before we move on from this little Myanmar connection, I just noticed something very relevant during the 8888 uprising, that there are all kinds of things in the first that started with the Rangoon protest, or it peaked with the Rangoon protest. where activists
now
contacted lawyers and monks.
That's one of those names like Bombay, because of course they've been like horribly colonized before, so their anti-Western sentiment was definitely not unfounded. If you want, like shooting an elephant by George Orwell, takes place in Burma, right?
Oh, okay. Well, okay, but here's what I noticed. It's like the demonstrations in the streets became the students started protesting. They were quickly joined by Burmese citizens from all walks of life, including government workers, Buddhist monks, Air Force and Navy personnel, customs officers, teachers, and hospital staff. The demonstrations became a focal point, which spread to other state capitals, and upwards of 10,000 protesters demonstrated outside the Seoul Pagoda in Rangoon, where demonstrators burned and buried effigies of Ne Win and Saint Lwin in coffins decorated with demonetized banknotes. Further protests took place around the country at stadiums and hospitals, but here's the big one. Monks at the Seoul Pagoda reported that the Buddha's image had changed shape, with an image in the sky standing on its head. And then the authorities imposed martial law after that. But just the idea that all the monks were like, oh, the Buddha's image has changed. It is a sign that our base neoliberal revolution is, ordained by the heavens and we have to overthrow the socialist government. It's like, sounds a little bluebeamy almost. A little Psyop-y maybe. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's maybe, this I don't know. I don't know how much, Leslie Kean picked up from her early thing. I mean, she didn't write a book for another 16 years. And the next one after Burma's Revolution of the Spirit was UFOs, generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record, with a foreword by John Podesta in 2010.
Of course.
And then, oh my God, and then wait, in 2017, what's her third book? Surviving Death. A journalist investigates evidence for an afterlife. Okay.
Another thing with that Robert Bigelow's obsessed with, like consciousness, just very
interesting.
Very suspicious, yeah.
It's something we're noticing now is that...
Very interesting,
and
that there's a link between these
There's
two
a big
things.
link that we're just becoming aware of, and I didn't quite realize the extent of it, but the fascination with near-death experiences by these exact same people, and they do hint that there's like a connection between whatever this phenomenon of UFOs or ETs is, and the experience of a near-death experience. Yeah, and I think and there's a lot of stuff mixed in there. We recently went on the Skeptico podcast and we discussed this a little bit, right? And I guess, Alex on the Skeptico podcast was able to debunk, I assume he's correct about this, that the whole thing about how when you die, your brain releases a bunch of DMT, and then that's why people have psychedelic near-death experiences.
Yeah, Joe Rogan said that to Robert Bigelow. I did hear that part of the interview. He did. And Robert Bigelow just kind of nodded along and didn't say, that's not true. So, I don't know. I really don't know if that's true or not, if the DMT
fact
thing is
that
true.
I do think he was correct on Skeptico of saying that it was Sam Harris who first kind of popularized that meme, that's what happens, and it would make me a little suspicious that if Sam Harris is kind of the main progenitor of it, but it is kind of a thing that's been floating around there, and I guess if it's debunked,
if you think about it, it's probably fake. Doesn't seem to be quite...
or maybe there's something more complex. I also thought that just even if that is true, it doesn't mean that near-death experiences are bullshit or that it's just a psychedelic trip.
No, of course. I mean, as
if anything, maybe that's your body is priming you for like passing into another realm of existence.
Yeah, exactly.
So it would make sense.
Again, like the whole binary, which I find to be something that's a little bit sus sometimes about like the consciousness people, the spiritualism discourse. I think that like the body and the spirit like are deeply intertwined. You can't quite separate them. There's definitely a discourse of the body as a prison. If you go really too far into that, you get into kind of a Gnostic zone. There's a maybe extreme form of asceticism where you have that, but I think that, to say that, I think that we've talked before about how certain substances maybe can be portals to the Claxton men that maybe do have some ontological reality to them, and this allows access, and that's not necessarily good, or it's not necessarily good that is happening. But, if this, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's an ontological a priority of whatever some other non-DMT NDE over one that is related to naturally produced DMT, or that there's essentially a cause if they're in some way correlated. I don't know, but anyway, yeah. So it is sus definitely that Sam Harris would perpetuate that, but yeah, I don't know if that's true. But definitely, yeah, your larger point that these two things are linked and these people are into both increasingly now, and I feel like they've won the UFO battle and now they're moving on to the NDE battle.
Yes. I'm looking. I'm looking here that like the blurbs that were written for her book Surviving Death, which is actually a Netflix documentary series now, I guess, in 2021. I don't know if it's come out yet, but Netflix is pumping these things out real fast. They also had the Bob Lazar documentary. We will get to him eventually.
We'll talk to him about that. Yeah,
but there's Ralph Blumenthal, who I think was an investigative reporter who she's done a lot of this UFO stuff with, and then Hal Puthoff, director of the Institute for Advanced Studies at Austin. Had something very nice to say about, and of course he's worked with Robert Bigelow and then Mitch Horowitz, the author of Occult America and One Simple Idea. Interesting. It's almost like I'm getting, I haven't seen the word pop up yet, but I'm getting some real theosophical vibes from these people. Between the UFOs
definitely.
and Surviving Death. And
for sure.
And given all the theosophical and elite associations with KPFA, that she would just kind of end up there is kind of interesting. And and I do. What do you think about the connection between NDEs? Like, why do you think they are so fixated on kind of linking these two subjects together? Because it still feels a little bit like they're not telling everything they believe. Or everything they maybe know. They're like hiding something, but they keep hinting very obviously.
There are a lot of people around this who are always hinting like there's so much information that I could show you if I was just allowed for me to do so, that there's just no doubt about it. There's always like these little hints or something, and then they'll be like, oh well, what you've seen is tantalizing, but really we have all this secret information that I've seen and you can't see that really proves it. So they're always doing that about sort of not showing their whole hand. But yeah, and in terms of their beliefs, I have my own theory. I've been nursing a little bit of a pet theory around this. That's a little bit, it's a little bit out there. I'm not 100% committing to it fully, but I've been thinking about this stuff, reflecting maybe since our skeptical appearance, which you mentioned, the topic of UFOs came up. And of course, over the last week, there's been this great intensification of the UFO discourse. And I have been thinking a lot and reflecting a lot on the UFO that you hear about the most in this new discourse, which is the Tic Tac UFO. That was seen in a 2004 encounter on the USS Nimitz by some pilots. So this is a UFO that apparently there's some pilot who I guess coined the term and said that it looks like a Tic Tac. And that to me is a little bit strange. As I mentioned, I think on our skeptical appearance, it's a little bit odd that there's this Tic Tac shape that we're being told about, because what happened to the flying disc? What happened to the flying saucer? Did the aliens invent a new UFO that's better? Or what? Like they were so advanced that they were able to travel, like do interstellar travel, and just like somehow like, it went from being kind of this chrome shape, like, a plane, to being kind of looking like, an AirPod case or something. It just seems to be very, very odd to me, So I'm thinking, what does a Tic Tac look like? Tic Tacs usually, I mean, I don't know if they actually talked about the color. I think that maybe they even did mention that the color was white, and that's what Tic Tacs usually. That's what Tic Tacs usually are. They're usually white, and they're usually sort of cylindrical, rounded cylinders that are a bit oblong. And to me, a Tic Tac kind of looks like an egg. If you think about you could describe an object that's Tic Tac-like as being also in a way kind of egg-like, or at least ovular in that sort of rounded way. And if you look back, cast your mind back to our Eliza Lamb episode, we talked a lot about Crowley's ritual where he first conjured, the famous gray type entity lamb, and the importance of the egg as a theme in that. And the egg, of course, if you also look at our Reptoid episode, reptoids being a major theme in UFO lore, the egg is a very prominent theme as well, and this is something that Blavatsky, I think we talked a lot about. You were just mentioning theosophy. We talked a lot in our Reptoid episode about the secret doctrine, and in her sort of theosophical synthesis, she's referring to a lot of Orphic and also sort of Gnostic beliefs. It's kind of a Christian polemic that would conflate Orphism with Gnosticism, although they do have some similarities, such as it's not a lot of the time the emphasis on snakes, but in Orphism in particular, which was kind of a mystery religion, sort of, or a loose group of ideas around texts that had been attributed to Orpheus, who's often associated with Dionysus. So there's a lot of hymns, Orphic hymns, that are out there that talk about the sort of Orphic theogony, or the sort of standard, or this this variation within these different theogonies that they offer. These different hymns, these different Orphic materials, but something that features in a lot of them is the idea of kind of a cosmic egg as being the sort of origin of a being, which is called protogonos or phanes. So in their theogony, in the Orphic theogony, basically there is an egg that appears. This is let me read this little ditty, this little stanza here that is a translation by Thomas Taylor of one of these Orphic hymns. It's pretty on point in terms of what it is. So this is about Protogonos, who is an important figure, sort of the first king of the world, almost a demiurgic figure, but not a bad guy. So it says, O mighty first begotten, hear my prayer, twofold egg-born and wandering through the air, bull-roarer, glorying in thy golden wings, from whom the race of gods and mortals springs. Ericapeus, celebrated power, ineffable, occult, all-shining flower, from eyes obscure thou wisped the gloom of night, all-spreading splendor, pure and holy light. Hence Phanes called, the glory of the sky, on waving pinions, or like wings, through the world you fly. Priapus, dark-eyed splendor, thee I sing, genial, all-prudent, ever-blessed king. With joyful aspect on our rites divine, and I looked at the Greek for this, and it was something like orgiasmos or something, so like when they talk about these divine rites, it's sort of orgiastic connotation here. I'll go at the Greek in a second, but anyway, with joyful aspect on our rites divine and holy sacrifice, telete, a common big Orphic topic, propitious shine. So this guy is like a kind of interesting entity. He's got these big sort of wings. He's often depicted being kind of tangled by a serpent. He's a beautiful golden angel of light. Comes out of an egg that's produced by the whirling serpent-like movement of the air, or often by, maybe a serpent around this egg. In fact, in the Greek of that poem I just read, there's a word, divethes, which is, it's in some kind of case. I forget exactly what it is, but I remember seeing it, which really means like turning around like a disc, this spinning egg. And, I think, when we have this tic-tac, there's kind of the expectation, and it's very interesting to me. I was thinking today, first we had these flying saucers, a saucer. And what in our Mothman episode, we talked about Ivan Sanderson, the racist Bigfoot guy's idea, or a notion that Kenneth Arnold, being so spooked up, like the whole idea of flying saucers, maybe was put out there by psychological operations men. He put it in those terms. And it was interesting that first we have this idea of flying saucers. What is a saucer? A saucer is a tray. A saucer is a plate. It's like a ritual platform. And then after the flying saucer, we have now the tic tac, or the egg
egg
UFO. And I feel like there's sort of an expectation that something might come out of the egg.
Might hatch out of the
yes.
egg?
Well, that's, something's in there, right? So
I think you might be onto something there. It just,
I'm just saying I sense Shaitan afoot. And
yeah.
Some kind of ginly, weird, bizarre, new cult or like cultic views where the whole NDE thing, I think, is all about, I think Robert Bigelow even said something in that Rogan interview where he was like, hey, it's religion's backyard, it's their backyard, and they get upset when you're moving into their backyard.
That's weird too, that they aren't trying to work with religion. They have they're not trying to work with kind of the sort of Western religions. They're not trying to really work with Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. They are kind of disingenuously trying. Weirdly. Yeah, they are kind of trying to instrumentalize certain Eastern religions like Buddhism or maybe elements of Hinduism or things like that, but they aren't really interested.
Eastern wisdom,
yeah,
like
with the exception of maybe people like Danny Sheehan, who hang out with the Catholics all the time. Like the Jesuits seem to be the one organized religious group that is very interested in the UFO phenomenon, and also is not totally shunned by certain elements of like the ufology world. To some extent.
Yeah,
Would you
true.
agree with that?
I think you can find... Yeah, well, I think that he is unique in his emphasis on the Jesuits and in Catholicism and the UFO angle on that. I think you can probably find people in all religious traditions who have an interest in UFOs or in the question of extraterrestrial life or whatever. But in general, yeah, you're right. Like they have very like KPFA, changing images of man type views where they have kind of a romantic view of like Buddhism or Taoism or things like that.
Yes.
And something that's like monotheistic or where, the devil is a bad guy or something that's not, and I think the whole thing with the NDEs is, I don't know, again, it's all very murky when you get into the afterlife, how does it work? There's very old Islamic teachings that suggest that, your soul is maintained consciously after your death. You don't just lose consciousness and then wait until Judgment Day, but, that is something that's anticipated. And I see my sort of paranoid or instinct or my suspicions of my hermeneutic of suspicion kind of gravitates toward the idea that the reason why the NDEs are so compelling is some way to like cheat death. It has something to do with the idea of transcending that barrier, that the ETs are going to come, they're going to explain that they created us, God's not real, and we can all become gods if we just,
hook up to the Neuralink,
like, learn about the NDEs somehow. Yeah, that's what I really think.
I noticed. Well, that I think you might be onto something there. And I didn't remember that Bigelow mentioned in the Rogan interview. He said something kind of interesting because he was gesturing towards all this NDE stuff. But then I think Rogan was asking him about psychic phenomena and, is this going to be a thing in the future where we're all just going to be more psychic, as we evolve to higher levels? Because it kind of sounds like we're already almost like low-key psychic in a way in our ability to to speak in language and read each other's like social cues and stuff like that and like deal with abstractions. It's almost a kind of like, compared to every other animal, it's like kind of a almost like parapsychological phenomenon. But are we basically all going to be able to be like indigo children later and hone our remote viewing skills and all that? And Bigelow kind of surprisingly was like, I don't really think that's going to happen. I think what will happen is we're going to develop technologies that's going to allow us to basically do those things. And that's how we're going to get there. Not through biological, like just pure natural biological evolution. And he was like, oh, you like things like Neuralink? And he's like, exactly. And I'm like, okay, well, what the fuck? Hold on. Like, so we all have to get we all have to get the brain chip now to become psychic.
Which is so sus because we joke about Bluebeam and everything. Bluebeam itself is kind of like this weird the blue beam idea originates with this guy who we mentioned before, Sergei Monast, who was kind of like this. I mean, he did like die mysteriously of a heart attack, so I don't know, maybe there's something there. He was like super anti-Semitic and anti-communist, and his speeches have a lot of problems, but it is interesting that he did say, I mean, it doesn't take maybe too much to predict this or to sense this aspiration, but he did talk about, people having chips in their brains, that were going to make them susceptible to blue beam and things like that, So,
well, I mean,
the blue beam idea, he's on something. It's really, they seem to be rolling it out, and and the reason why, like, of course, when you talk about the NDE connection, that's one thing, and something that I've heard around this whole UFO stuff is that some people are skeptical of it. I actually saw on Twitter, Liz of a certain, rival podcast of ours, in a kind of a Yankees Red Sox way, where I doubt that they ever think about us, but so she posted something that was, to her credit, something that like anyone with any kind of remotely critical sensibility would say about this, which was that, well, she said, I believe in aliens, obviously, but this UFO thing stinks to high heaven. So I don't know, kind of a hedge there with the whole thing. Like, I subscribe to the whole ET hypothesis. It's definitely not Jin. But anyway, so but she did say that
nobody
it's
wants
high
to
heaven.
consider
But
it's Jin.
in the replies, oddly enough, their fan base, the biggest simps online, who will line up and, defend like a DOD mercenary because he's on their favorite podcast. They were all like, no, Liz, it is real. It is real, which was odd to me. And there were a couple of people, this is where I'm going to get to the actual point that brought this up to me. There were a couple of people who did agree with her, but what they were all saying was that it was like a trick to increase defense spending. And that, to me, doesn't explain it sufficiently. Because
I would agree.
They will increase defense spending to protect people from Antifa and whatever, the Proud Boys, or
they don't need to go
China,
this
Russia.
far to increase defense spending.
No, not at all. In fact, there's no suggestion of ever not increasing it. Exactly. It's not needed. So they could do anything. Up. They would just it would actually be better if they said, and I think this is kind of an implication that some people around the subject make, that they are like drones from China, Russia, our enemies, Iran or something, sending these drones around. But, why not then just say, we're being spied on by what are obviously foreign drones? There's this whole thing of, they defy the laws of physics. I don't know. It's ETs. Hail Satan. What what are they getting
I don't think that, because
it
doesn't, that is a fear in some of the declassified FOIA documents from very early on, like Project Blue Book, Project Sign and stuff like that, is there was a lot of anxiety, both that maybe all the way up to maybe the Soviets have contacted ETs and the ETs are actually comrades and have given them the technology because they think they're better, or they have just figured out something on their own and they're using it to fuck with us, or just the fact that we have so many. I think that was the thing we read in a previous episode where somebody was proposing to put fake UFOs up in the air so that we could compare the reports that people give. And so it'd be like, oh, okay, secretly that was one of ours. And see maybe if they could kind of deduce, if they could suss out which ones are real and not, because one of their main concerns was if it became known that these kind of mysterious aircraft could violate U.S. airspace with impunity, that would be a kind of, that would look bad for us. And it maybe would open the door to maybe the Soviets thinking, oh, well, their radars are jammed with weird flying saucers, so we could fly in and do Red Dawn or something. Kind of a silly thing to worry about, but you can kind of see where they were coming from. But I don't feel like that today with the kind of air power capability that we have, both domestically and abroad, that the idea of, I don't know, I would write off immediately the idea that we're really afraid that Russia and China would have it, or that we would not want to disclose it to the world. Also, I just don't buy that at this point, given the course of military technology and development, that if Russia and China had something, that it would be something we absolutely don't have. I kind of could maybe believe that in the 50s or the 60s, when they did get ahead of us in certain scientific areas. I don't believe that
Russia or China has a flying machine that defies the laws of physics as we know them, or whatever, or has no visible propulsion the stuff they're saying about these UFOs. Like,
but I wouldn't say that about the
no.
United States government, because I do hold that out as, and I think, you know, when we get into Bob Lazar in the next hour here, we can talk about that kind of idea that they've recovered crashed UFOs, or they've been able to kind of reverse engineer them. And then, like you said, the difference in the shapes of the UFOs, like some of them are triangles, some of them look kind of like eggs or Tic Tacs, other of them just kind of look like orbs of luminous light that just, you know, fly around, or they go into the ocean and or pop back out, and all kinds of stuff. So, you know, I don't know if we can totally rule out that somehow, whether they got it from a crashed ET or some jinn came through a portal and they're doing like a Michael Aquino ritual and told them how to build it, or whatever the fuck, or they just figured it out and haven't told anybody, and it's like super compartmentalized. Again, it's getting a little bit harder to just like kind of believe that, because if we could figure it out without some kind of extra means that is like some kind of weird unexplained means, then why have no other people been able to even get close to creating some like a prototype of something like that? You know, you feel like if something is that imminent in the course of scientific development, that other people are going to kind of stumble on the idea sooner or later, and it's been decades now, and it still happens around the world, and the United States government seems to have They certainly have the most advanced capabilities in the world. If anybody were able to build it, them and their Nazi scientists, perhaps, it would have been, you know, Lockheed Martin. And
it's possible that Eisenhower made like a gin pact, but I don't necessarily like. I don't know, the stuff around. I mean, maybe they're just like mistaken. Like their analysis of it is just like completely off. But like the whole idea, like that it defies the laws of physics, is quite a grand statement. So yeah, like it has to be something like
I would add that caveat that
evil gin pact,
yeah,
or like something like I don't know. They're lying. They're just lying about them, you know, defying the laws of physics.
Even with the caveat you threw in there, like defies the laws of physics as we understand them. I think, you know, that little caveat can do a lot of work in terms of, sure, I guess we don't fully understand everything. So there probably are things that, and I think when you get into this kind of like psi phenomenon thing,
but
like Bigelow
even
was
like
talking about.
Even the known laws of physics, like, either they made a gin pact, which is possible, and this is all part of some massive gin deception as well, which I think, I would give some possibility. Or they're just like straight up like blowing smoke up, you know, everyone's ass and saying that they defy the known laws of physics. There's, you know,
I don't know. I mean, I
don't believe that we
that
just invented this like propulsionless thing. I don't know.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Well, I mean, and to be fair, I guess these disclosures now, these mainstream disclosures, are not saying that the U.S. military developed this technology, but they are saying that they appear to defy the laws of physics as we know them. So they really are, even though, you know, Leslie Kean is such a conservative kind of UFO beat reporter, she still is kind of like there's a big opening there that you could drive a truck through of like making it's very easy to make that logical leap then to, well, it must have been some kind of alien or other being, because it doesn't sound like we would have the capability to do this, even if like we would have wanted to, or, you know, been able to cover it up. It simply
doesn't. I'm sorry, the ET hypothesis is a psyop and a lie, and it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for all the traditional reasons that everyone has always pointed out, which is that how, like, you know, like they said in the Yorker article, how are they crashing? How are they so advanced but they can't hide? You know, like, how do they travel all the way here? Like, why? Like, what is the abduction phenomenon connected? Like, why are they abducting people? Like, to do experiments on... What could the value of that possibly be? And like, you know, why would these abductions have the nature that they have, where like, and also like they gloss over the things that Jacques Vallée and others have pointed out, which is that these UFO, you know, I think they even might have mentioned in this article, or some article I read about this, the airship flap that happened in the 19th century, but they glossed over completely that had a humanoid occupant, that it looked completely different. They made it sound like, oh, people were seeing the same old UFOs that we've always seen, But no, that's not how it is. Like, there's
we talked about it at length, how it was like contingent upon the imagination of I think that was I was kind of trying to say on Skeptico as well, about how like I'm not saying it's all, you know, fake, but clearly like even if you're taking something like a UFO sighting, if we're going to take that comparison for a second, a UFO sighting and a near-death experience. Somebody experiences something that they feel is very imminent and real, but just how the airship or the flying saucer maybe perhaps in some way is mediated by our kind of imagination and where it's at in that historical moment. Maybe also like a near-death experience is mediated by whatever religious tradition or spiritual beliefs you were raised with and the context of the culture you're living in. And so you may be more likely to see the white light or like some kind of pearly gates stuff, or, you know, like a big bearded man in a robe, or, you know, something like that. Whereas maybe in a different culture, you might see something different. Maybe you'll see like kaleidoscopic colors and Quetzalcoatl or something when you die. Like, who knows?
Well, yeah. You know? Well, I mean, certainly that is true of NDEs, that people who are Christian, like, they'll see Jesus. You know, people who aren't Christian, I mean, maybe sometimes they will, like, and they'll see Jesus or something, and they'll be like, oh my God, I need to convert and become Christian or something like that. But, you know, people see all sorts of different things when they have near-death experiences. And you know what? Now that I'm realizing the connection between these two worlds of like the sus UFO ET hypothesis Psyop and the NDE Psyop, all apologies to Alex of Skeptico, but now I'm kind of getting tricked by the light pilled, where I'm thinking like, because not everyone who almost dies has a near-death experience, you know, not like, right? You know, people almost die, and I assume that not all of them have your typical near-death experience, either of heaven or of hell or anything like that, you know, so some people do. Why? You know, is that really the afterlife they're seeing? Is it something else? Like, is this a
trick?
A trick by the light, by the light bearer, perhaps. No, but
my God, yeah. We'll do a whole episode on trick by the light. It's a fascinating theory.
Yeah, eventually we should. But yeah, I just feel like certainly. Well, to go back to the UFO thing, leaving the trick by the light thing beside, I think that as again Jacques Vallée, someone who definitely has a certain cachet in these circles, suggested in Messengers of Deception and in Passport to Magonia, there's an inextricable component of deceit in this.
Yep.
And these beings, like, assuming that they are real and there's some intelligence behind this phenomenon, it's being deceitful and it's playing tricks.
Yeah.
And you can't...
Like a djinn would.
You can't... because it is a djinn.
I mean that's what we like to say, that like we kind of ride on, like, we're kind of like UFO djinn pilled a little bit, because it's not just a kind of like a taxonomy kind of thing of like, well, it has the properties of a djinn and that it's like a spirit being and it's kind of liminal and vague and you don't know, but there is a kind of trickster spirit aspect to the djinn of like, I'm going to trick you and deceive you and you can't trust me, but I might act a certain way and get you to trust me. And you don't really know. It sounds like djinn are kind of, it's hard to really understand like what motivates them, but you shouldn't trust them.
Well, djinn have all different motivations, and there are some good djinn, just like there may be good quote-unquote ETs. But I think that djinn, you know, they're not very well defined. Like, they're beings of fire, you know, much like Protagonos, you know, they're beings of fire. They precede humanity, you know, but they didn't create us, you know, they're not our creators. And yeah, I think that, you know, their behavior is not consistent with, I mean, again, like, there's all these problems where, like, you'd have to have this like, extremely faster than light travel. You'd have to have, like, this intelligence manifesting in the same way. You know, do these ETs really look like Greys? Like, why? Because if you're thinking in a scientific way, it makes no sense. It makes no sense that there would be an alien being that would look so similar to human beings. Just think about how diverse life is on our planet. Then you're talking about life on a totally different planet is taking the exact same, like, evolutionary paths. Like, you know, I guess that, you know, maybe it could be God's design that all, you know, advanced beings look this way, but I just don't buy it. Their behavior doesn't make sense. Like, and I mean, I guess you wouldn't expect another civilization to necessarily have behavior that totally makes sense, but everything else is like so similar and so easily accessible to our understanding. Like, oh, they have these ships that fly through space, or and things like that. So it's just like you know, and they're here to explore and do experiments in a laboratory, and they take us away at night, just like, we abduct, slaves from Africa or whatever, like things like that.
They're kind of like, it's like, they're kind of like little space conquistadors. And, when we think back, if there is some kind of a plot going on here, what did Cortez do when, he reached South America? Didn't he kind of fall into a kind of thing of pretending to be a god?
That is that's the old sort of story about Cortez.
He presented himself with his fancy technology and his fire sticks and his armor and stuff, who looked kind of different, but still not so different that it was totally incomprehensible. But basically, I think he made a deal, and what's his name? Moctezuma. Yeah, like kind of ceded over power to him because he promised that he would, give him all these riches and technology and cool shit. And then he, I think, like ceremonially in front of everybody, like handed over, I don't know, his crown, whatever his crown was, to Cortez, and then like walked like on this, like, I think platform kind of above the crowd, and then people started stoning him, and then his own people stoned him to death after that. Somebody told me that.
Really?
I'd have to double check. Maybe that's like a legend or whatever.
Be true.
Somebody was reading a book about the kind of Aztec and the Spanish conquest and things like that. And anyways, I'll double check it. If it's wrong, I'll cut it.
Yeah, they did fight. The Aztecs did fight against Cortez and everything.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what they did. Is like it was like the leader kind of tried to sell out his own people, and the people were enraged.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And killed him.
I see.
Yeah. And then they did try to resist against the Spanish, but it was like he got almost like the ultimate blue beam psyop of this like Spanish guy coming and being like, look at all my cool technology and my horses and all this stuff, and I can help secure you like even greater power if you just like name me the new kind of god ruler. But then his people did not appreciate that, according to maybe a legend. There's different versions of.
Well, the victor usually writes the history, so there's a lot of
exactly.
There's a lot of different versions of what happens after the conquest. But anyway, I mean, well, if they behave like us, because they generally weirdly do, and they even resemble us, which you wouldn't necessarily expect. They seem to have like comparable values. It's just like in a way, depending on who you listen to, like whether they're peaceful or whether they're, warlike, it's not like they think like chopping off arms is funny or something. They like have an idea of scientific inquiry maybe or something, or I don't know. It doesn't make any, like all these different UFO stories, if you really take them broadly, like you can try to cut out the ones that don't fit with a certain narrative, but a lot of them are just very wacky all over the place, Yep. Like if you really try to reconcile all of them, you'll end up with something like there's 58 different races in a galactic federation that are like here, it's like, no.
Exactly.
There's some deception going on. There's something afoot,
There
and
is.
I think
there
that
absolutely is.
Yes, there's some Jinli trickery, and there's also that's really my position, and I think the general line that we take on the podcast is that we walk the line of Jin versus Psyop. I think there's some Jinli stuff going on, and there's some Psyop stuff going on, and there's both and Jin Psyops happening as well. Yeah,
exactly. Right. We need to have an expansive definition.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?
personalities to touch on, I guess, as we go through this New Yorker article.
Yeah, this is a very good, I just think this article is a very good example of the UFO discourse that we're being subjected to right now in various ways, including, the Tic Tac stuff, etc. The way that it ends with hitting on the Tic Tac yet again. You just really, emphasizing that whole thing. But there's also some interesting stuff here about Bigelow that I wanted to mention that I thought was worth mentioning. It says that Bigelow believes, as one source put it to me, that there are aliens walking around at the supermarket. According to an article by NJ Banias on the website The Debrief, Bigelow hired investigators to look into reports at Skinwalker Ranch, of dog-like creatures who smelled of sulfur and goblins with long pendulous arms.
Oh boy. Yeah, I forgot about that Dogman connection. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the cryptids actually pop up a number of times talking about Skinwalker Ranch and the UFO thing, and all of these people actually seem to be much more interested in cryptids than you might think, right?
Yeah, well, there's just like they're more interested in the NDEs than you might think. There's, this is a new wave. They have a Eastern wisdom type orientation. There's more in heaven and earth than. But at the same time, they also are weirdly scientistic and all about technology. In ways that I think we'll continue talking about.
Just to point out again, the layers and layers of interlocks, kind of ideologically, with people being all interested in the same thing. There's one other little paragraph about Kean that I didn't want to let slip by, which again I think I sent to you with a brain exploding emoji. And it says, Kean had read Whitley Strieber's Communion, the 1987 cult bestseller about alien abduction, but until receiving the French findings, she had never had more than a mild interest in UFOs. Quote, I had spent years at KPFA reporting on the horrors of the world, injustice and oppression, and giving voice to the voiceless, she recalled. As she acquainted herself with the plenitude of odd episodes, it was as if she'd seen beyond our own dismal reality and the limitations of conventional thinking and caught a glimpse of an enchanted cosmos. Quote, to me, this just transcended the endless struggle, class struggle of human beings, she told me, during a long walk around her pricey Manhattan neighborhood. Quote, it was a planetary concern. She stopped in the middle of the street. Gesturing toward a heavily overcast sky, she said, why should we assume we already understand everything there is to know in our infancy here on this planet? And an editor at the Boston Globe's Focus section, who had admired Kean's writing on Burma, tentatively agreed to work with her on a story about UFOs. Kean chose not to discuss it with her KPFA colleagues, apprehensive that they would consider the topic at best frivolous. Really? KPFA? I don't know about that. She was certain, though, that anyone given access to the French report's data and conclusions would understand why she had dropped everything else. She refused to include any ironizing asides in the article, which was published in May 2000, as a straightforward summary of the Cometa, the French investigations. Quote, but then, of course, nothing happened, she said, and that was the beginning of my education in the power of the stigma. Okay, so, she's also talking about, in this very spiritual kind of what, that this is almost a revelatory, transformative thing to start to take seriously, and that they're, we're just infants on this planet, and well, if we're infants, then who are the parents? I don't think God. I don't think that's what she means.
No. And
I don't think that's what Robert Bigelow means either. He mentioned multiple times in the Joe Rogan interview that maybe there are ETs and stuff like that. I don't think at least in the part I heard, he didn't go so far as to say there are aliens walking around in the supermarket, but he does say a lot of things like that kind of insinuates that, not only, but he won't say absolutely yes.
Well,
but
that's
he's like,
where I think
maybe.
That's where I have the sense that this is all kind of, I feel like it might be headed in the direction, well, certainly, they know more than us. They're so much more advanced. Whatever they think, if they're out there, it's so bizarre. I don't know where we're headed with this, but their implication does seem to be quite heavy. They kind of play around with it where they're like, we don't know what they are. We just don't know. We can't say what they are. We just don't know. But really, everyone can tell what you're implying You know, it's like it's like this very slippery, toidly almost move where they don't have to confront like what is obviously the implication. Like,
speaking of toidly, Khalid, did you notice in any of the parts of the Joe Rogan Bigelow thing you listened to that he kept making references to the reptilian brainstem?
Yes, I did notice that. He was like, I'm just sitting here. Like, it was a very weird exchange where that I almost felt like anyway, so there was a very weird exchange where Joe Rogan was like, what is the evidence for any of this? And Robert Bigelow says, you don't want to know that. And Joe Rogan's like, what are you talking about? Like, I do want to know, that's why I asked. And Robert Bigelow's like, oh, I'm just sitting here with my reptilian brainstem. Like, weird. It was very bizarre. I almost felt like he was stalling for time. Did you hear that part? Like, I almost felt like
I think I did. I did. Yeah, it jumped out at me. It's like, what do you mean
it was
your
very
reptilian
odd.
brainstem?
Yeah, it was weird.
Kind of, kind of like implying that.
He had some kind of heavy knowledge that Joe Rogan didn't want to know, but then what he said ended up being like psychic mediums, automatic writing, things like that. Telepathy, typical.
Yeah, he brought up. Didn't he say that automatic writing was basically communication with the dead?
Yes, or with something, with the dead and with other, consciousnesses or something like that.
So he's kind of endorsing a Crowleyan line there a little bit.
He kept saying, like, in the literature, it's proven. And Joe Rogan's like, what do you mean in the literature? You know, people can make shit up, etc. Very odd to see some pushback from Joe Rogan, but I guess I appreciate it in this context. I mean, I wish he would show that same pushback when people would be saying that, like, you know, Muslims must be genocided, like it's the only solution or whatever. But, you know, Gavin McInnes is on there saying that we must destroy the mud people or something. But, I wish that he would have the same skepticism there. But I did appreciate it in this context. And he was saying, like, you know, what do you mean it's proven in the literature? And
very evasive.
Was like, we need to do double blind experiments. It's like, well, you know, of course, like, there's no real.
He's talked elsewhere. Everyone knows what he's done, and one of the things he did was hire Hal Puthoff, and Hal Puthoff has talked about this, and I think he recommended that Joe Rogan should have Hal Puthoff on to, like, explain to him how, you know, psi phenomena actually work. But I feel like he could have said a lot more, but at crucial moments he would kind of he'd punt the ball to, like, oh yes, in the research it shows this, like in the writings it shows this, and just kind of very very odd, and like he was up to something. Another thing that he did, and then also Chris Mellon, who went on Joe Rogan earlier this year as well. He's having, like, all these people on. And Chris Mellon, who, like, we don't even have to say it, like, he's a scion of the Mellon banking dynasty that was instrumental in, like, sponsoring Tim Leary and LSD stuff in the 60s and all kinds of other wild shenanigans. They were connected to so much shit. And, like, during the Cold War and like culture manipulation and psyoping people with new agey stuff. And he kept constantly saying, like, oh, I'll tell you about it later. Like, I'll tell you off air. And, you know, like, basically when Joe Rogan would press him on specifics, like, I'll tell you off air. And even the comments in YouTube were very annoying. Like, Joe Rogan's is like, yay. And everyone else is like, fuck you. Like, why are you doing this? And, you know, basically, I think Bigelow did that a few times. Like, I can tell you about that later off the air. So it's like they're right in the open, kind of not showing their cards in this kind of coy way. Yeah, like,
and why not? Like, are you about disclosure or not? Like, you're not, you know, the big bad guy or whatever, or like the MIBs who are covering all this up. So why won't you say anything? Like, why are you being so toidly? Why are you creating this whole thing? I thought this was an interesting part of the article where it kind of talks about how, I mean, I think that part of this is, like, kind of untrue based on sort of some of what we've talked about in the past. But anyway, so this is about the story, the famous story, and December, you're right, the month of December 2017, when the story came out, you know. The Pentagon confirmed the program had existed, but said that it had been closed out in 2012 in favor of underfunding priorities. Elizondo claimed the program had continued in the absence of dedicated funding. The article dwelled not in the reality of the UFO phenomenon. The only actual case discussed at any length was the Nimitz encounter, this Tic Tac encounter, but on the existence of the covert initiative. The Times article drew millions of readers. Kean noticed a change almost immediately. When people asked her at dinner parties what she did for a living, they no longer giggled at her response but felt rapt. Kean gave all the credit to Elizondo and Mellon for coming forward, but she told me, "I never would have imagined that I could have ended up writing for the Times. It's the pinnacle of everything I've ever wanted to do. Just this miracle that happened on this great road, great journey." It was hard to tell, however, what exactly AATIP had accomplished. Elizondo went on to host a History Channel docuseries, Unidentified, in which he solemnly invokes his security oath like a catchphrase. He insisted to me that ATIP had made important strides in understanding the 5 observables of UAP behavior, including gravity-defying capabilities, low observability, and trans-medium travel. When I pressed for details, he reminded me of his security oath. So perhaps unsurprisingly for a Pentagon project that begun as a contractor's investigation into goblins and werewolves and had been reincarnated under the aegis of a musician best known for an album called Enema of the State, ATIP was subject to intense scrutiny. Kean is unwavering in her belief that she and an insider exposed something formidable, but a former Pentagon official recently suggested that the story was more complicated. The program she disclosed was of little consequence compared with the one she set in motion. Widespread fascination with the idea the government cared about UFOs had inspired the government to at last care about UFOs. So, of course, the government has cared about UFOs a lot in the past, like, as we've talked about, like in our Mothman episode, etc., and in our past UFO episodes, like, it's not the first time they've cared about it, but it is interesting that was, like, kind of a canary in the coal mine and not really, like, uncovering this secret program, but sort of being like, oh, hey, like, this is something, like, kind of test, a dry run or a test pilot, if you will, for this whole thing. And when they saw that people were into this, then they went harder on it.
Yeah. It does seem like they're kind of... they are testing the waters and, like, priming us a little bit towards, and then seeing what they can get away with to some extent, and how far they can push the ball, and they seem to be getting closer and closer, right?
Yes. Well, Leslie Kean apparently recently came out and said that there were probably, like, UFOs out there, like, being, UFO material that had been recovered, like crashed ships. And she's, also, even despite this, whole thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I think also another person recently who came out with a book like that, who I think we had on the list to kind of do like a review of, was, I think it was like Diana Pasulka's American Cosmic book, which she at least I'd have to read the book, but in the interviews I've heard with her, she sounds less sus than, say, like Annie Jacobson or Leslie Kean or any of these other people, in the sense of she's kind of like a folklorist, like academic, who kind of jumped into it. But she did have this kind of weird sort of kind of personal line of the narrative where she met some insider who, like, blindfolded her and took her out to some remote location, I think in, like, New Mexico, and then showed her, like, debris of the kind of debris that To the Stars Academy claims that it has, that, has no kind of known origin. And there's even been mainstream articles about it now, how, like, To the Stars Academy has gotten army contracts to develop, shields, like, based on it's very weird and kind of thing. So she kind of throws it in there. I think, from what I understand, she doesn't quite, go all the way. Like, she's open to the idea of, like, were they psyoping me? I don't know if they were. But yeah, that's a common thing, is like, being shown a little piece of a thing, and then that kind of, permanently ET pills you. And but is this all kind of misdirection? Is this all manipulating people? Or, like, the Catherine Austin Fitts story about being taken to that sketchy kind of that think tank foundation that does a bunch of weird new agey stuff now with, like, the human potential, movement, and being asked, like, can you draw up, like, a scenario plan for, like, disclosing ET presence to the public? And, like, James Woolsey was there and shit, like, it's like, wait, okay. And I think she said even, and she's kind of connected to all kinds of weird things, but I think that even she kind of said, like, but no, actually, no. She said either they were psyoping me or they're aliens. And I think she kind of implied that there's like a secret space budget, they're aliens, et cetera, but like draw your own conclusion. I'm not saying they're like definitively are. It's just, take a look. And remember that somebody asked her if she wanted to meet an ET, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Someone asked her if you want to meet an alien.
In the 90s.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And it is interesting how this stuff really, all these interested parties started swirling around in the 1990s. I think we did discuss on the Skeptico episode. I forget like how it led to us discovering it. But, there was that whole connection where we found out that, I think it was, what's his name? The Harvard guy. John
Mack.
Yeah, John Mack. John Mack was funded by Laurance Rockefeller in the 1990s to the tune of $250,000 a year. And then we found from that Laurance Rockefeller was instrumental in funding like MUFON and every other one of those acronym organizations that was promoting UFO stuff in the 90s. Laurance Rockefeller was like very interested in it. And then, of course, like once you get to Laurance Rockefeller, you start connecting to other people that were coming up at that time. And, I found right here that there was a kind of a report released that I think is still... Yeah, it was a Laurance Rockefeller initiative. Records from the Clinton OSTP related to UFOs, extraterrestrial intelligence, and the Laurance Rockefeller Initiative. And you can still find this like via Laurance Rockefeller's Wikipedia page. It's not exactly hidden. It consists of 88 documents. There we go again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Talk about an 88 uprising. Yeah, so in January 2001, the Office of Science and Technology Policy released to me, the author Grant Cameron, 991 pages of documents. I wish it was 911 pages, but of documents related to a FOIA request asking for documents related to UFOs, ET intelligence, and the Rockefeller Initiative. And basically, I guess you could go and look through, and there's a whole bunch of stuff here about everything from, not just UFOs, but ETI. Laurance Rockefeller, who believed himself to be the reincarnated emperor of Atlantis, was very, very interesting. So there was, I believe, a meeting of kind of experts that Laurance Rockefeller held in 1993 at Rockefeller's JY Ranch in the Teton Forest near Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I guess a lot of people, this guy Gibbons, I'm trying to remember who Gibbons was, but then, who else was it? Richard Farley, Henry Diamond, Dr. Scott Jones, Dr. John Mack, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, Linda Moulton Howe, really big in the kind of UFO disinfo alternative media world. Dr. Stephen Greer and Keith Thompson attended. And, I won't go through all of that now, but then I noticed there's an archive.org thing on disclosureproject.org that was a press release from 2007, which has been taken down. You got to go back, into the archive to find it. But this says insiders expose reasons for secrecy. So, this is back in the late 2000s. And it says Director Stephen M. Greer reports that government insiders have revealed the existence of a shadowy, highly classified program related to UFOs. And he says the reasons for the secrecy are simple. The inertia of highly classified programs, embarrassment over past illegal actions taken to enforce secrecy, and the fact that the energy and propulsion systems behind the mysterious UFO objects have been studied and fully understood. This disclosure would spell the end for oil, gas, coal, and other conventional forms of power, and with that, the end of the current oil-based geopolitical order and economy. The truth is, our tax dollars have been used to investigate this matter for decades, and it is time for a dividend on that investment. The full disclosure of the facts will enable humanity to attain a sustainable civilization without global warming or the need for oil. Recent calls for a U.S. government investigation into UFOs have not taken into account the fact that such investigations are ongoing, highly compartmented, and top secret. Now, this is a doozy of a paragraph. Dr. Greer states, quote, "As early as 1993, when I personally briefed CIA Director James Woolsey on the UFO matter," so there we go, Catherine Austin Fitts corroborated, "we knew of ongoing secret projects to which President Clinton and Mr. Woolsey were denied access. The senior counsel for the Senate Appropriations Committee, then headed by Senator Byrd, told me directly that upwards of $100 billion per year was going into so-called black projects, including UFO programs, but that with a top-secret clearance and a subpoena power, or that without that, he could not penetrate the veil of secrecy. Subsequently, working with philanthropist Laurance Rockefeller, Dr. Greer provided in-depth briefing materials for President Clinton and Hillary Clinton, who reviewed the matter while staying at Rockefeller's JY Ranch." So I guess the Clintons were there too. Dr. Greer reports that the Clintons refused further disclosure of the matter. CIA Director Woolsey frankly stated that they could not disclose programs over which they had no control or access. Mr. Woolsey and the Clintons were shaken by the secrecy and the power behind it. Since then, the Disclosure Project has uncovered thousands of official documents and blah, blah, blah. And, basically such operations are rogue and beyond the scope of congressional oversight. But then, interestingly, at the bottom, this is interesting, note, that was added here, presumably by Stephen Greer. "The two paragraphs referring to Laurance Rockefeller and to Bill and Hillary Clinton had to be removed from this press release when we sent it out through our press release service, prnewswire.com, because they refused to send out the original press release with those references. It was referred up the chain of command at their organization and censored by them. When you think that we have a free press, think again. This was not even censored by the outlets themselves, but by the entry point to those outlets." Wow. So I guess if you mention Laurance Rockefeller's name in a press release, it goes up the chain of command and somebody says, no, you are not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to print something that says that the Clintons went to Laurance Rockefeller's ranch and sat down and talked about like ET intelligence and UFOs, and they were shaken by what they found and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that I think the important thing about that is that I think we can safely say that a huge a chunk of this current crop of people that from Chris Mellon, Leslie Kean, Stephen Greer, the Clintons, the Podestas, all these people, basically, and James Woolsey, even via Catherine Austin Fitts, all of it seems to have started with an initiative that was funded and promoted by Laurance Rockefeller. So this is like Laurance Rockefeller's pet project for some reason to basically dig up what we know about UFOs. Now, there's a lot of dimensions to that could get complicated. For one, it seems like if anybody's an insider of the American elite, it would be Laurance Rockefeller. And so why would he be using his puppets, I think we can safely assume, in the government, like the Clintons and John Podesta, to dig up information that even the president and the director of the CIA have been denied and don't have access to. So is there like a fissure? Is there some kind of weird, I don't know, is there a Yankee cowboy info war where some of these right-wing Pentagon people or Southwestern defense contracting, big wigs have, their skunk work stuff and they're not necessarily sharing it with everybody in power? Maybe. The other thing that jumps out very bizarre about Laurance Rockefeller being all behind this is, where do the Rockefellers get their money from? Oil. Completely from oil. Standard oil. Right. And so I get that, they've gone through a few generations now, and a lot of the Rockefellers have these kind of new agey, kind of hippie leanings. And I believe in the last 10 years, maybe around the time that not long after this article kind of came out, I think the Rockefeller Brothers Fund or whatever, one of the kind of financial firms that kind of manages Rockefeller wealth assets and investments, they announced very publicly that they were going to divest from fossil fuel companies. And now they're very big promoters of so-called green energy stuff. And so that's an interesting twist, because I don't know, it's like a kind of simplistic sort of economic class reading would make you think that at the end of the day, the Rockefellers want nothing more than to keep the oil flowing, and they don't care. You know what I mean? As long as they get. But then, I don't know, you could kind of look at it another way as well, what if it is in fact decided that oil its days maybe are numbered as the critical resource, and something's going to replace it. So might as well, you'd want to be in the room where it happened when they're deciding what that is going to be, and then be set up to be able to profit the most from it, and basically kind of just like how the Rockefellers did have their trust broken up, and it eventually, like, the fucking T-1000 like coagulated back together into like 4 oil companies again over the 20th century. But they basically kind of they reached a kind of, you could say maybe like a limit, just being in the oil industry, and that's when they got into the banking industry and Chase Manhattan Bank. And that was what David Rockefeller basically, they got into basically banking and politics was the two things that they kind of really were involved in. And of course, Laurance Rockefeller, I think we mentioned in a recent episode, was an early investor in Apple and a bunch of stuff in Silicon Valley, which I think in a way kind of, I'm excited to talk more again about like the Yankee and cowboy stuff and maybe our evolved understanding of it. But I feel like that's one of the things that kind of defies kind of a simplistic frame of that, you know, basically these kind of arch Yankees were all up in Silicon Valley, investing in it at the very least. You know, they might not have been kind of on the ground or whatever, but, you know, we can't say that like Silicon Valley and the whole project of computer technology was like solely a cowboy thing. I think it was like, you know, I mean, you had MIT, anyways. Right. All that stuff. But so it does make you wonder, like, what was he up to? I mean, he's dead now. He died, I think, in the 2000s, I think.
2004, yeah.
Yeah. So he's gone. I don't know if his children are, you know, carrying on his legacy. I've always heard rumblings that the Rockefellers are like very into like new agey stuff, like to this day. Yeah. So I would assume some of them are. But, you know, it's like, who's still kind of the motor behind funding all this stuff? Because it seems like it originally was Laurance Rockefeller. So, yeah, like, there's so many layers of I can't trust that it's hard to really unpack, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I do wonder, I mean, certainly there is, like, all of this. One of the main themes that comes up in like the long-standing, like going way back, the long-standing government interest in UFOs, is one of the themes is always like the materials, you know, the alternate forms of propulsion. I think we'll get into that like when we talk about Bob Lazar a little bit. Like, so there is this idea out there, but like, do they really have these mysterious metals or materials? Like, and if so, like, do they really come from like a crashed UFO or what?
Like, it's a good question. I still can't say.
did a djinn come and like offer them like these materials? I mean, if not, then if so, then you'd think they'd be able to harness it, unless it was like, you know, one of those like wish granting jinns where they twist the wish around and it's like, we wish for free energy propulsion source, but they don't know how to reverse engineer it or whatever.
Maybe.
But I don't know. Like, did a ship, a UFO or like an alien ship really came here from Zeta Reticuli or whatever, was flying around, got like hit by lightning in a big storm and then crashed, and they recovered its materials, and that, like, you know, they're trying to do something with that? It doesn't quite add up.
The only thing I could think of is that, like, as Stephen Greer might jump out and say that, well, it's quite possible that in our ignorance and hubris we shot them down. But then that also begs the question of, you could shoot down a UFO with like 1950s air defense artillery.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe today if you have a heat-seeking missile, but even sounds like the way these things move is so fast.
Well, they can travel faster than the speed of light, theoretically. If these ships are the same as the spaceships that are traveling through space, you know, they can probably go pretty fast. And they definitely can, even in the atmosphere when people perceive them, they go really fast, right? They can just disappear. Yeah. You know, so like, you can really shoot one down. I don't buy it.
It would seem incredibly difficult. And I think they did bring up, though, in the Rogan Bigelow conversation, the possibility that perhaps or Joe Rogan asked at a point, I think he was frustrated by some of the like these questions that we're bringing up. And I think Bigelow might have postulated maybe that, well, maybe they crashed them on purpose. But then there's like a question of, then why would they have dead alien bodies in there? Is that just to psyop us or show us that it's weird?
That seems like to psyop us.
Yeah.
That's like that would only be to psyop us as like some kind of Jin Lee trick. That's the only thing that I can think. Speaking of Jin Lee tricks, I think it's worth reading like this ending of this New Yorker article, because this, again, the Tic Tac thing is what they're hitting us over the head with right now. Listen to this, like, again, this is a perfect example of this type of stuff. So, the author has produced like enough like critical stuff. She even was a little bit critical of Leslie Kean at certain points and some of her claims, and she gave space to people who said like that she went too far in some of her assertions or things like that. But at the end of the article, this is where she winds up, and she ends it on this note: the government may or may not care about the resolution of the UFO enigma, but in throwing up its hands and granting that there are things it simply cannot figure out, it has relaxed its grip on the taboo. For many, this has been a comfort. In March, I spoke with a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force who said that about a decade ago, during combat, he had an extended encounter with a UFO, one that registered on 2 of his plane's sensors. For all the usual reasons, he had never officially reported the sighting, but every once in a while he'd bring a close friend into his confidence over a beer. He did not want to be named. All right. Why am I telling you this story, he asked. I guess I just want this data out there. Hopefully this helps somebody else somehow. The object he'd encountered was about 40 feet long, disobeyed the principles of aerodynamics as he understood them, and looked exactly like a giant Tic Tac. When Commander Fravor's story came out in the New York Times, all my buddies had a jaw-drop moment. Even my old boss called me up and said, I read about the Nimitz, and I want to say I'm so sorry I called you an idiot. And that's where the article ends. Like, so Tic Tac UFOs are real, our base troops have seen them, get ready for the new Messiah to hatch out of the egg and tell us that, we were created by the Anunnaki or whatever.
Yeah. I think that there is a kind of weird insistence on the just like the baseness and the amazingness of the USS Nimitz Tic Tac incident. The fact that it was like a Top Gun fighter pilot who saw it.
Yes.
They can't get enough of how trustworthy he is and stuff. And I mean, kind of like fair enough. Favorite. Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, yeah, sure. Like, this guy is, I guess, believable. At the same time, like, I don't know, any kind of number of things could have happened. But, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I'm not a pilot, but I'll tell you what. Like, I'm not a pilot, so I don't know. Like, I mean, again, like, I leave the possibility open that, and people do say that sometimes pilots misidentify things all the time. I'm sure that there are, like, UFO debunkers out there who would tell you that it's like swamp gas or something like that, so they have their opinion, but let's just assume that, this person did see something like that. I don't believe that it is just aliens from another planet, like, because it doesn't quite make sense.
It makes a little bit more sense. I think there's like the interdimensional aspect, or some kind of, I don't know, if these people can manipulate space-time, they don't need to fly, they don't need to travel as the crow flies from Zeta Reticuli to come here. They figured out some way to pop up on a different planet. And
yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, even if it is like Jin from space or whatever, something, I don't know. But like, even if it is, yeah, or even if it is just space aliens or something, like they're playing some kind of trick. They're using some kind of manipulation, even like, because it doesn't quite make sense. Like, why are they allowing themselves to be seen? Like, what? Like, I don't like. And
yeah, without actually
want to do anything about it,
what they're up to, and it does make me think.
And why has the appearance of their ships changed so at such a so dramatically,
Well,
it's odd.
Yeah, I mean,
and why does it change dramatically over time? Like,
you could start throwing out hypotheticals of like, then that's why there's different aliens with like different technology that looks.
Yeah. Okay. So there's like 58 different ETs here. And what?
They're in the supermarket with us.
They're all secret. Yeah. Exactly. Like, okay.
Like, what are they up to? Are they infiltrating our society? Like, what the hell? It's like you really have to start asking some pretty wild questions if you're going to accept. I just don't. The fact that he could just say casually, there are probably aliens in the supermarket, and then just kind of go on and be coy and kind of conservative about talking about this kind of technology and not, like, kind of like fuck anybody who does that. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
speak more on that, please. What do you mean they're aliens in the supermarket that look just like us and are walking around like we basically are in They Live? Like is what it sounds like, and what does that go from? Because then if they're walking around in the supermarket, they're not just observing us, as Stephen Greer had described. They're not just watching us and being liminal and kind of not doing whatever. They're definitely up to something if they're walking around like dressed up as humans, like Third Rock from the Sun or some shit. There's something they're doing here. Like they just want to live as it's like fun to, pretend to LARP as a human or something like that. Like there's got to be something very wild, or it's like, have they evolved to be sus AI gods who are in a simulation and they can actually hack their way like into our reality and like play around
like agents
it's Second
in the
Life.
Matrix? They
kind
just
of
I don't know.
I have no
they're wearing
idea.
like human like skins or something.
Like they design their cyberpunk 2049 character and then run around and do whatever they want. Like it's like who can really say at that point? But you got to say something. You can't just throw these little nuggets out and kind of imply because this.
Well,
it's
if
like somebody.
If we really don't know, I feel like it's weird because like we really don't know. Like then. At least you got to give some play to the possibility that it's all a satanic deceit, right? Like, why not? Why are the ETs more plausible than that? Or, it could be anything,
But then I think about who some of these people are, and I think about these
of course,
old
Well,
Scion
they have
families
an idea
and weird
that they
CIA
want.
military people.
Well, that's my whole point, is that they want something. They already have a conclusion that they desire. It's not just like they act like, we're just dealing with the data here. This is just what data says. But no, like, so many people, when they deal with these things, like, they have a foregone conclusion.
I think...
Yes.
Yes,
that they want something to hatch from the egg,
was,
and they want to worship it.
What the fuck was Laurance Rockefeller's conclusion, the guy who thought that he was the reincarnated pharaoh of the lost empire of Atlantis? Like, just think about that for a second. This is a guy who has the cachet and the money and the power and the connections to basically invite the president and his wife out to his sus ranch in Jackson Hole and tell them a bunch of shit about how they're aliens that scares the president of the United States. And then when somebody tries to release a report about it, it gets taken down or basically banned or whatever. I mean, who knows with that? But still, think about that for a second. This is a guy who controls a vast fortune. His brother controlled Chase Manhattan Bank and the Council on Foreign Relations, and even said, remember David Rockefeller, that famous quote of I thank the New York Times for not exposing our conspiracy over the last 30 years. Otherwise, our New World Order would not be able to be built. And just weird. These guys are fucking weirdos. Okay, so they're talking about talking with sus light beings and ETs and stuff, and they're clearly hinting at some kind of ancient alien kind of They taught this in the article. It says somebody said that they taught the Sumerians accounting, and it's are these the people that are truly worshiping the shaitanic false god of capitalism to the extent that they're the aliens who taught us finance yes, and usury and accounting yes, and taught us to mine.
Well, that is an old idea from the Book of Enoch that these beings came down and they gave us certain technologies and things like that.
The Anunnaki.
Yeah,
that whole thing. Or was the Watchers in the Book of Enoch, or the Archons?
Yeah, the Watchers. It was the Watchers.
And they used us as slaves to mine gold, which
that's the
talk about
the
the
Anunnaki.
New Age.
I don't know.
The original Edward Lansdale was an Anunnaki commando who was sent here to make everybody.
Well, I feel
gold.
The whole idea that they were mining gold is that's part of the UFO take on the Anunnaki, and not the original Anunnaki Mesopotamian myths. But I mean, there's that. I don't really know what the origin of the connection with gold is. I think that originates with like UFO stuff around gold, but
yeah.
Or UFO
it makes me think when you get the Mellons and the Rockefellers and the Kean, you know, the niece of the guy who chaired the 9/11 Commission and is like basically descended directly from the founder of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, come on. You know, it's like so fucking weird. And then, you know, they're all like up with all these like ex-CIA and like military people. Makes me think of what Jimmy Fallon Gong postulated about the elites have a secret religion, and like it's a small club and we're not in it, and they believe certain things, maybe about spirit beings or some kind of, maybe they're trying to bring about. Okay, the other thing, just maybe on like a slightly more grounded level, that scares me about all this stuff is the idea that, like, because it's one thing to think about, okay, blue beam as being like, they're gonna like shoot a hologram up in the sky, and it's gonna be like, I'm an alien.
That's not what we're necessarily saying is going to happen. Although, like, you know, like there could easily be, you know, something that I found like while I was researching, you know, for this episode, looking around at the latest UFO stuff. Something I found was like a video of the Disney World like New Year's celebration where they're flying these drones that look exactly like X-wings. They're like X-wing size X-wings that are like flying around, you know, and they simulate like everything, you know. They have them. They're like they're projecting the sounds and everything, and they're like, "Bravo, Red Leader," you know, like we're going to, you know, like Roger, we're gonna go intercept Death Star and everything, and like they fly like behind a precipice, and you see like a bright flash of light, and they like, you know, disappear, just like they went into, they did the hyper jump or whatever from Star Wars, you know, like Yeah, so the technology they have to do these illusions is pretty sophisticated.
Yes. But I think, the scarier part of it for me is what I've seen in the last week, because what happens when, you know, Anderson Cooper, Rachel Maddow, and Tucker Carlson are all basically soy-facing at, like, the revelation that, like, an alien has landed. And what if it's done in a way that the entire media apparatus, like, leans into it and embraces it? And there's all these New York Times articles being like, wow, I can't believe we were so wrong. Like, all these, like, NPR people are going to be like, whoa, like, I guess aliens were real, and now we have, like, the scientific proof of it. I guess we have to reorganize all of our spiritual and social beliefs around this new data point, this revelatory data point we've received. And I could see, like, what if it like trickles through academia and like the media, and then basically like it puts such pressure on organized religions to either like accommodate themselves to it or pull people into kind of like a new religion that's like based upon the real truth of our, and it's all about how aliens created, like engineered us, but like we're on a path of evolution and we can become gods just like them, and all these other things. Like the ontological disruptive capability of a kind of blue beam type scenario, if it's rolled out in the right kind of performative way, and not just in a way that's like, I'm an alien, like everybody believe me, but if it's done in the kind of way that a major event would unfold, you know, like like COVID,
I mean,
or
this
something
is
like that.
This is like my nightmare scenario. Well, yeah, I mean, COVID, like there was obviously like visible signs of COVID, but in many ways, like COVID was invisible, and a lot of people who never really saw clear signs of it, you know, did. And I believe that COVID was something that was real, but it does attest to the fact that, of course, a pandemic is something that's much less, as you said, ontologically disruptive than the idea of like rolling out alien disclosure. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but that is like my nightmare scenario where it's like all of a sudden like, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer if you don't believe like in the aliens, you know?
Yeah,
but
wow.
Yet, like somehow they won't like show us like, oh, really, you don't believe in the aliens? Like, but if like, I mean, I think it's like kind of like a dystopia. Like, I mean, it's scary, but I mean, it's kind of like an amusing idea where I don't necessarily think that I hope, you know, heaven forfend, like, inshallah, that nothing like that happens. But yeah, it would be like an absolute nightmare where like we don't even see anything really. Like they don't show us anything more than we have now. They're just like, nope, these aliens are real. Like, and this is what they said. And like most people are like taking it at face value because they've been primed like in all these various ways.
And
like
you know what? I mean, just think about it.
You know?
Yeah, no, exactly. Let's put aside the moment of like the kind of visual as we've had to do throughout the entire UFO period, like of not having a kind of visual clear cut. Oh my God, there's an alien. But like, just think hypothetically, if Joe Biden like goes on TV and is like, my fellow Americans, I have been contacted by the High Chief of the Galactic Federation, and it's true, folks, it's true. It's true. There's aliens, you know, and that's number one. Number two, we're going to enter an alliance with the Galactic Federation. You know, just imagine like the nuttiness of that, but also like 4 years of Trump kind of primed us to like any absurdity is believable now, and kind of like it's like anything a president would say. It's like absolutely just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
and,
last night, like after spending all day reading about this, like I said to my girlfriend, like, just so you know, like if in a month, you know, there's a whole big thing where people are saying that like UFOs are real and aliens, like that's not true. And she was looking at me like I was insane. She was like, because she had not like heard anything about it. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, and I was like, you know, all these cable news personalities are talking about how all this UFO stuff is so exciting. And I don't know, I'm just saying that I just want to let you know in advance that if they start coming out and saying that there are all these aliens and we all have to believe in it, I'm not going to believe in it, like, and it's not true. Like, we're not believing in it, you know?
Yeah. In this house, we do not believe.
Yeah, exactly. She was like, all right, that's nice, you know? And I was like, look at what Chris Hayes said. Look at what Chris Hayes said. She's like, it's time to go to sleep. But,
yeah, right.
You know,
but, you know, people that can't even, like, too afraid to even touch, like, the JFK assassination and are speeding past that all the way to, like, oh, yeah, but aliens, I can consider that. It's like, whoa, hold up. And I think that's what's scary about it is like if Joe Biden came on, and also like not even necessarily like something goofy, like I sat down with like the representative of the Pleiadians, but if he said that, say, it has come to our attention, there's like an archaeological find somewhere of like a flying saucer that seems to comport with all these sightings that we've had, but like we've found the remains of like an alien. And, like, this is a major significant discovery. And, like, we've got our best scientists. They're going to work on trying to figure it out. And we don't know everything right now, but, like, we have to come out. It's time, folks. It's time to, like, tell you the truth that, like, we found one of these things. And, like, how would cable news react to that? You know, like, would they reject it outright? I would kind of think not after they've been doing this priming about it now.
No,
like nobody's going to be on CNN
it.
or Fox being like, is this a psyop? Like they're not going to say that. They might bicker over kind of, well, what does this mean? But they're going to accept the premise. They're going to accept the ontological premise if like the president says it. You know, or the equivalent maybe of like a Dr. Fauci, but like the UFO version of Dr. Fauci, like a DARPA scientist.
Yes, and in terms of what you're saying, like, you know, the whole thing, because of course, like, the whole blue beam scenario is that, like, this inaugurates the religion of the Antichrist and everything. But the realistic version of that is not necessarily, like, you know, we've talked a little bit about, like, the whole nature of DAJJAL and everything, and how I conceive of this as something that maybe unfolds over time outside of being concentrated necessarily in one individual, regardless of whether or not it eventually will be, but something that I do see as a sort of realistic version of the sort of false messiah of like Buddha, you know, and Krishna and all these beings appearing in the sky and then fusing into one Antichrist who is like, I'm the real truth of all the religions, and everyone's like, oh, I believe you because I have a chip in my head or whatever. Like, the realistic version of that is all these Robert Bigelow people coming out and being like, we're the experts on near-death experiences and UFOs, and like we can tell you, like, you know, like Stephen Greer coming out, how to contact these beings, like, we'll, you know, we're the ambassadors for this concept. Yeah, we'll help guide the epistemological relation with this stuff, you know.
You know what it sounds to me like it might be? Because why else would NDEs be such an important thing that they're always trying to connect if they're maybe not attempting a kind of power play to like kind of like snatch the wig of the actually existing religions that exist and build their own religion that they can kind of shape and control for their own purposes, whatever they may be, whether they're all a bunch of like closet theosophists or they're just like Satanists or whatever. I don't know, or transhumanists.
They already do have their own, like, okay, so just listen to speaking of, you know, we talked about Leslie Kean, the way she was portrayed in that article. I got to give a shout out to, even though we obviously are often critical of the debunkers on this show, I will give a shout out to the blog Bad UFOs, which brought this to my attention, which is like a blog dedicated to debunking UFOs. And this is an article, or an interview rather, that Leslie Kean did with a journalist on Stuart Alexander, someone who I guess is a medium who she corresponded with. And she did a 5-year investigation into the mediumship of Stuart Alexander. So this is what she said. So I'll just read the interview. So the interviewer asks, as a journalist who has covered all manner of topics and then focused on a serious reporting on UFOs over a decade, what was your motivation behind pursuing a study of a possible afterlife, which many would consider a quote-unquote fringe topic? She says, I'm interested in large mysteries, unexplained by science, which are well documented and therefore undeniable. They expand our sense of who we are and our place in the universe. I don't consider this topic to be fringe. It is simply difficult to study, often misunderstood, and can't offer proof, although I believe we have solid evidence that consciousness is not limited to the physical brain. Nonetheless, many scientists don't accept the reality of phenomena that challenge understanding of the laws of physics or belief in physicalism. And gullible people often make sensational claims based on assumptions and not scientific evidence. But if one is motivated by deep curiosity and has a discriminating mind, I believe this topic is worthy of serious attention given the potential it has to redefine our understanding of the nature of consciousness and of the meaning of death itself. And it can be studied with the same rigor and discrimination as any other area of investigation, but of course with its own unique challenges. This is where it gets wild. So the interviewer asks, you reported observing some very mind-boggling phenomena in your investigation of Stuart Alexander, including ectoplasm materializing into a living hand, the levitation of objects, and independent voice. You also witnessed communications from loved ones and successful book tests. Is there any doubt in your mind today that these phenomena were genuine and not some kind of magic trick? She replies, I have absolutely no doubt, not one iota. I did my due diligence. When I began sitting with Stuart's small circle in 2015, I thoroughly checked the seance room to make sure there was no way to sneak in or out, nothing hidden in the room, and nothing strange about Stuart's chair or seance room table. I brought my own cable ties, which were pulled tightly around his bare wrists, the thinnest part of his arm, locking his wrist through a loop under his chair arms. The straps could only be removed with wire cutters. Stuart also wore luminous pads taped to each knee, so everyone in the room could always see where he was when it was dark. The door was locked during the seance. There was no background music at the sitting. Every movement was detectable in the quiet of the small room. And some phenomena occur in the light. I have sat with Stuart in 4 locations with different sitters, and the phenomena always occurred. Also, I have interviewed him and his circle members and come to know them well. It says, what about Stuart's long history as a physical medium? Stuart demonstrated his unusual abilities over many years with a variety of elaborate physical restraints, visible knee markers, with his hands on both sides. His mediumship was scrutinized. It took decades to develop. He has trained his patients sitting devotedly with the same small circle year after year. That really impressed me. There was nothing flashy about Stuart's mediumship, nor any desire on his part to attract attention. He eventually offered guest sitting simply so that more people could have the experience. Yet he always kept his mediumship private, entirely separate from his personal and professional life. Even his 2 adult sons knew nothing about until the first edition of An Extraordinary Journey was published in 2010. So the interviewer asks, of all that you witnessed or reported on in your book, what was the most convincing to you? Well, certainly Stuart's physical mediumship is at the top of the list. I was impacted by 2 readings I had with outstanding mental mediums, one American and one Irish, in which the same things occurred despite that these 2 mediums did not know each other. They also did not know my name. 2 loved ones came through for me, behaved the same way indicative of their contrasting personalities, and gave the same personal message to me in each reading, word for word. The evidential information was spectacular in its specificity. So there's, she mentioned some scientific research. Near-death experiences represent an intriguing body of research, and my personal after-death communications from my younger brother who died in 2013 were very convincing to me, as I describe in my book. So then, This is probably the best story that she offers, I think. Have you witnessed anything of interest since completing the book that you might add to your views? She says, in May 2019, I experienced a full-form materialization in a seance with Stuart. His communicator, Dr. Barnett, who normally speaks in independent voice, walked out of the cabinet, stood in front of me, and touched my hair. He then placed both his large hands on top of my head, bouncing them up and down for about 1.5 minutes. That's a long time. These were solid, quote-unquote, living hands. He spoke in a recognizable voice. I just wanted to let you know that I am a solid human being, he said. Then he returned to the cabinet and disappeared. My comment on this otherworldly, mind-altering experience is best taken from what I wrote in Stewart's epilogue. The mind can barely grasp the fantastical nature of a human form emerging from ectoplasm, walking, talking, touching, and then receding back to from where he came. And where is that? Dr. Barnett says he once lived on this earth. Is this materialization proof that we survive physical death? Does it mean something else? I don't think we can answer that question with any degree of certainty, but this experience will live with me forever. Okay, so, wow. She goes on, but she says, So she says, there's no way to answer this question with certainty. Ask the fully materialized, solid, dead ghost that you saw what happens after death. Why can't you answer it with certainty? Like, what? And also, that's not, and also the representation of her in that New Yorker article and this is so at odds.
You're right, actually. Now that I think about it, yeah.
To a walking, solid ghost that touched her.
Wow.
And saw loved ones and spoke to people from beyond the grave. That's a huge deal. And, if she's right about UFOs, are people going to be like, Leslie Kean, put me in touch with my dead loved ones? And what are they going to say? Are they really going to be their dead loved ones?
Yeah, that's always the worry, isn't it? And just having full-blown seances like that and having, people emerge from ectoplasm, that is some wild shit to basically... Yeah. I mean, I get that she said, I'm very interested in kind of... testing out these things and, seeing what I can prove or whatever. But it also sounds like she's so far gone of being convinced because she's literally been touched by a ghost. And every time they do these seances, a ghost shows up or a crazy levitation occurs, all these other things. But then it's kind of well, if you're so effective at doing that, why don't you try to set up some way to prove it in your seances? Couldn't you set up a camera or something and film somebody levitating?
Yeah. Well, she says, I've come to respect how difficult it is for any of these manifestations to be produced in the first place. The fact they happen at all is extraordinary enough. So it's just bizarre that, we're now being set up, I don't know. It's so weird that, people who are supposed to, I guess Leslie Kean also is a journalist, so, we can trust her. I mean, the trust in the media has atrophied a bit, but, the idea that, we're gonna actually be expected to believe or accept this thing, I mean, I do, understand people's lived experience and everything, but, I have my own lived experience, and I have my own, spiritual beliefs and, my own understanding of the world, and, I'm not gonna accept this framing where it's, this journalist saw a ghost, or this journalist saw a UFO, or these Pentagon staffers or whatever saw a UFO or an alien, and the alien said this, and how dare you not believe it? I want to see it myself. If I see a real material ghost and he says something to me, obviously I'll believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll believe that it actually is physically there. I don't know if I'll believe that the ghost is what it says it is or whatever, but I'll definitely take it into account.
Yeah,
exactly.
But that's very bizarre, and it kind of indicates that she was a, quote, spiritual seeker in her 20s, and that's kind of downplayed as she just liked to do yoga and meditate and go on.
That was in November 2020, just a couple of months ago.
Wow. Okay, so it makes you wonder how long her family and stuff has maybe been interested in things like mediumship, seances, theosophy, all of these types of things that were pretty popular, a little over 100 years ago. And, is it on the one hand, you could say, oh, maybe she just is rebelling against her whatever kind of family or whatever. But
yeah, I mean, well, she sat down with Thomas Kean and asked him about UFOs, and he said, I'm super interested in it. And people said, what we need is something like the 9/11 Commission where everyone can talk to each other about this subject, because we learned that the FBI and the CIA never talk to each other and everything. So we need something similar about UFOs, where all these different organizations can talk to each other. That's what they were kind of saying. So
yeah, and she mentions a few times throughout the article that she was like good friends with Chris Mellon. So, which kind of makes sense because they're sort of from the same social milieu of like literally being kind of the most, the highest of the high class, basically.
In Silicon Valley, microdosing with B-Maces, I'm bumping number staging bitches, waiting to be awakened. If they ever activate me, I'm spraying, fuck out the way. Sleeper Asian, nah, shit, they put the motherfucking chip on my wrist. I'ma show you what the significant is. You ain't nothing but a tiny ass flip in this bitch. And millionaires, they flipping the script off. 100 grand finna fail when I lift off. Not in a bitch, then I disappear. Shorty, I got rapture, why ain't you here? Reptilian, hybrid, body in fear. Figment of your mom, bitch, I'm not even here. I'ma do it so nice, can't tell you, oh dear, still motherfucking flesh in this whole damn sphere. Yo, fuck that thing, that's on me, bitch, M.I.A. Coming down, in that holographic thing. There's something in the air, I don't care, I'ma make it happen. Something in the air, it ain't fair, but it's time for action. Yo, fuck that thing, that's on me, bitch, M.I.A. Coming down, in that holographic thing. There's something in the air, I don't care, I'ma make it happen. Something in the air, it ain't fair, but it's time for action. Yeah, off that Steven Paddock pack, adrenochrome blunts that's back to back. Game for the squares like a bitmap, born up in this thing, cybernetic implant. Bitch, I'm augmented but not in control. Black cars, they opted patrol. Looking over my shoulder, I think I see someone at my door. Act like you don't know who run it, bitch, you funny. See me stunting on these pussies like Keanu. What you gon' do? Probably nothing. 666G shit got me buzzing every corner. I can't function, fuck it when they put me on that fucking cross. No, I ain't bluffing, stupid bitch. Fuck that thing, that's on me, bitch, M.I.A. Coming down, in that holographic thing. There's something in the air, I don't care, I'ma make it happen. Something in the air, it ain't fair, but it's time for action. Yo, fuck that thing, that's on me, bitch, M.I.A. Coming down, in that holographic thing. There's something in the air, I don't care, I'ma make it happen. Something in the air, it ain't fair, but it's time for action.
Our last segment here, I think we want to talk a little bit about kind of a towering figure in the UFO community that comes up again and again.
Someone who we've gotten 2 questions about him in the grotto. So I figured that I was curious to investigate the recent documentary about him, which we both watched for this episode, and just generally check up on him, Bob Lazar.
Mm-hmm. Robert Lazar, and kind of, I don't know, as one article that we found, I think probably the first hit that comes up asks, do we owe Bob Lazar
one of
an
the
apology?
First, if you Google Bob Lazar, I think one of the first things that come up is this article that is like, do we owe? Yeah, evidence suggests the whistleblower Bob Lazar was telling the truth all along.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but also, I think in his story, it brings up some of the issues that we were just we were just talking about, of kind of you lead us right up to the edge of basically the implications of, okay, we have crashed ET technology, but then when you really want him to get, I don't know, a little bit into the weeds of, so like what's up with these aliens or something, it's not satisfying, I guess. Like how, I don't know, what was your impression?
Yeah, well, that's what is supposed to be credible about him almost, that he didn't see an alien. Like, that he didn't actually see an alien makes him, like, more credible somehow.
Didn't he claim that they showed him a body, but he thinks it was a dummy?
Yeah, he saw cadavers, but he didn't see any live aliens, I guess. So that's an important distinction. And he also saw inside the UFOs that he was working on. His story is that he was basically a contractor, although it's changed a little bit. Like, sometimes he'll cop to being a contractor, sometimes he'll say that he was directly hired, but basically he worked for a place called S4 that was part of Area 51. Mm-hmm. Really, Bob Lazar is, like, largely responsible for, like, the popularity of Area 51 in our cultural zeitgeist. Like, there have been people before who had kind of hinted at, like, deep underground bases in the area, and of course Area 51 is a real thing, and like years before that, there had always been like, and they do work on like, you know, aviation and aeronautics,
experimental
and
aircraft.
Yeah, exactly. And years before that, there had been UFO sightings around the base because, probably largely because they were flying these, you know, experimental planes and things like that. But really, like him going on coast to coast and telling his story about going to Area 51 and scanning in and, you know, seeing these craft that they had that they were trying to reverse engineer. Where
9
the
of them,
were,
right?
You know, I think you said 9. And he saw the seats on one of them, and they were tiny. You know, they were too tiny for humans, so they could only be flown by little grays.
Didn't he also say that there really weren't any kind of knobs or levers or anything like that? That it seemed like there was almost some kind of like telepathic interface that maybe a Neuralink. I don't know. That like the whoever was piloting this thing kind of had to like they ran it kind of directly.
What's that movie about like the flying something by a plane, like, you know, with your minds?
The Flight of a Navigator? No.
Maybe. We had talked about.
Oh no! Oh, Stealth. Was it called Stealth?
No, that was like a 2012 movie or something.
Yeah.
That's like about a plane that like becomes autonomous and tries to kill everybody or something. It was like this was about like flying a plane with like a Neuralink. We brought it up before. Like I'm
blanking on
but
it
anyway,
right now. That's a possibility, I guess. I don't know. And like him describing kind of like how the technology works. I suppose. And then there's the whole thing about Element 115.
Firefox.
Oh, Firefox. Firefox. Yeah. Interesting. Fire beings again. Jinn. What a Jinn could look like a firefox, couldn't it? Or a phoenix, you know?
Yeah, maybe.
Fiery being. Interesting. Yeah, so I don't know. I wouldn't say that. It's hard for me to verify. I have zero background in physics, so like, or propulsion or engineering, so I don't really know if, you know, this craft, it has an anti-gravity drive that can like warp the space and time in front of it and like drag itself and like manipulate. I guess that's more plausible than they have some kind of, you know, propulsive combustion engine that would do it, because that is true that like every form of that technology we have can't do what UFOs do. At the same time, and you know, then there's like the Element 115 thing, which people say, oh, he like kind of predicted that was, you know, kind of a version of that was used as the kind of fuel in, I don't know, some kind of fusion reactor. What? Yeah.
Did he? Well, I don't think that the Element 151 is the same as like the real Element 151 that exists.
No, I think it's...
Or sorry, 115.
Yeah, 115,
Element
which is
115.
Moscovium. And yes, it was synthesized and then in 2003 and then added in 2015 to the periodic table. I feel like we brought this up before, maybe when we discussed Lazar in one of our
part
recent
of a
Q&A
component
episodes.
like it has similarities to thallium, which he was like you know, investigated or you know, prosecuted for like selling illegally or something at one point. He's had multiple
as the movie shows, like a very melodramatic scene where it's like the dude's iPhone, like FBI
they were trying
raid now.
They were trying to shake him down. The movie itself is like incredibly something, you know, because, well, they keep showing in the movie, they show you the flying disc, the silver disc, and Bob Lazar draws pictures of what he saw. He saw a disc-shaped UFO. So then, what's going on? Like, with these Tic Tacs? Are they different aliens that have different ships? Like, really? Like, you know, or was that a lie? What's going on? You know?
I don't know. I don't know. It's not impossible. I wouldn't throw it all out on that. That, like, if these beings have such advanced capabilities, sure, they would be able to use different types of aircraft. That's not, you know, if we're really going, if we're living on a prayer here and speculating, that doesn't seem to be absolutely, like, an insurmountable contradiction. That, sure, they could have different ones.
Significantly different. They do look significantly different. I guess there's like helicopters and planes. They look different.
I mean, look at a plane. You know, I mean, planes have changed.
They have different properties.
Sizes.
You know,
also they have different
can't
uses.
Go as fast as a plane.
Like a DC-9, and an F-117 stealth fighter or bomber look very different because they're built for different purposes. So who knows, why they look different. And if they're built by some secret program by humans, then it would be the kind of the same principle. They're used for different purposes, I suppose. There's no rule that it just is a flying saucer. But I do take your point that it seems like we don't see flying saucers anymore.
Or we're being told that like they don't really look like that or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that
the flying saucers,
because all these people like Leslie Kean kind of say, look, like they refer back to Kenneth Arnold and the cases in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, and kind of really valid. I mean, Leslie Kean has that like picture from Costa Rica of the flying saucer, in her apartment. So clearly, I don't think I haven't seen her advance the argument that they never were flying saucers. But clearly they don't seem to be anymore. Some new type of either form or a new type of technology has been created that has replaced the flying saucer by whoever is behind it.
I guess, which seems odd to me because, I get your point that, we have planes that look different, but planes, in the amount of time that they've existed, their fundamental appearance is still largely the same. You have jets. Stealth bombers look a little bit different, but
they have wings,
other than that, planes
and
and helicopters is a significant
yeah.
difference. Their wings, they're long. There have always been different looking flying saucers that people have talked about seeing. Different light patterns, different sizes, different general shapes. Diglocka versus whatever the flying saucer in The Day the Earth Stood Still,
Yes.
But they're still recognizable as what they are. You can see a bunch of different flying saucers that look different, but they're still your classic disc-shaped flying saucer. People have talked about seeing cigar-shaped UFOs and triangle-shaped UFOs
back to the 50s.
and things like that, but yeah, exactly. My whole point is why? Why are there these different shapes? What different uses could they have? Is one a mothership? What?
Yeah. That's the other thing that, the little flying saucer could almost be like a little scout vessel. And, like an X-Wing compared to a kind of Star Destroyer. There was one reference in the article.
Well, then why isn't the mothership, parked out, somewhere at the edge of the solar system? Why do people see the mothership?
No, for
Earth
sure. Well, there was
there
was that one thing in the New Yorker article where I think there was a pilot who encountered a UFO. I think it was over Britain, and this was after 2000, so it was relatively recent. And they saw what looked like
the Rendlesham Forest thing.
It might be. It was the one that he said that the
80s,
objects that were floating were the size of a small town.
Okay,
which is that's
weird.
kind of like Star Destroyer mothership kind of status. That's gigantic.
Yeah,
so it's
huge.
where are
exactly.
those?
That's like Independence Day almost.
Yeah. So if it's the size of a town, geez, a million people should be able to see it, but then it can still kind of disappear in a dime, just like the little ones can. It's quite odd. Yeah, it all kind of doesn't add together that if something that big, there's no flying craft that is even, at least UFOs are the size of airplanes often. It seems that way. They're not bigger than, a DC-9 or a 747, or they're often kind of small, but they've seen some that are huge. And I think there was one maybe in the 50s when some pilots kind of passed by one of the cigar-shaped ones, and they said that they saw what looked like windows on the side of it, which is weird because that sounds kind of like the fuselage of an airplane, just without wings or a tail. It was like a passenger liner with little windows on the side, or like a boat or something like that, which sounds more human in a way. A lot of the other ones seemed like they didn't have windows. That seems to be a common thing of flying saucers, is that to the extent that you could even see them,
they often don't seem to have windows.
Yeah, they don't have a cockpit window where the pilot can look out of. It's they're looking out some other way. Who knows? But so I don't know. A lot of it doesn't quite add up, and I don't know. Going back to Bob Lazar, okay, well, one thing that is significant is the stuff that these sus lords are coming out in the mainstream media with right now does seem to be pretty similar to what Bob Lazar said. That doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that there's a kind of a common corroborative lineage and a similarity between the stories they were telling, right?
there are overarching similarities, such as the idea the government has known about it, that they may have recovered parts of a craft. And there also does seem to be a push to, like, the very existence of the Netflix documentary, which has, like, this very cringe, for Jeremy Corbell is, like, the sort of main documentarian who's obnoxious in his own right. But there's this hilarious voiceover by Mickey Rourke, too, which is just really ridiculous. Like, this gravelly voice. It's like, there's some things that just fucking blow your mind, like when you see a goddamn alien. Like,
it reminded me of recently watching.
He's constantly cursing, it's like this weird, like,
with like weird CGI, kind of really dark, like spooky, almost like scary, kind of
like
demonic
Bob Lazar's
imagery.
Face morphing into a gray, and it's like sometimes you see a goddamn fucking gray alien, you just can't come back from that shit.
It reminded me of watching recently. I went back and watched Alex Jones's Endgame, which is surprisingly still on YouTube, and it just reminded me of like whenever Alex Jones's a voiceover narration would kick in after a segment, and like, the globalists have for centuries sought to dominate us and create a prison and like that kind of thing, like in his classic way, but speaking in a very serious, dramatic tone, and it's funny. It's a funny watch. It gets a little bit repetitive. It was hard for me to kind of really hang with it in like the second half. When they're just kind of, it's like they're nitpicking over. How can you prove it? Like, can you do something that can demonstrate, this kind of alternative physics thing that you got a glimpse of? And the answer is kind of like, yes, sort of, but like not actually prove it in this movie. And we did it one time, but then I lost the videotape. And I don't know where it is.
Yeah,
that was what
weird,
George Knapp said.
Where it's just like, I have a video of it, but I have all this crap piled up in boxes. Like, nice. Good going.
You didn't put that in a special box. ETs. Okay, cool.
Nice going. One thing that stood out to me as very interesting was the aspect of the hypnosis that they kept kind of emphasizing. There was a very creepy, like very, done up, like weirdly produced hypnosis segment,
breaking the fourth wall, right? Where the guy was staring into the camera.
Weird reverb effect on the hypnotist's voice, like trying to make it sound like extra hypnotic and strange. Yes, it was very odd, and it was like hypnotizing Bob Lazar to remember the UFO that he saw, so that he could draw it again, and remember the components of it.
Which he was very in support of, that it was an amazing tool to go under guided hypnosis, and he could remember all these little details which again, it's like it opens up this door of like, oh boy, like, okay, and we're not on this podcast, we're not, we do not endorse the false memory system, false memory syndrome foundation at all, but at the same time, when you're talking about these expert hypnotist kind of sus lords that want to get into Bob Lazar's head and like make him remember things, that door can swing both ways. You could uncover stuff that's real.
Mickey Rourke even said in his narration, like, memory is a tricky fucking thing. If you remember, like, can you remember? Yeah, like, it was just like, if you can't trust your own memory, it's like, well, can you fucking trust?
very weird. Yeah.
And it was weird because he even had that comment where he said that it was like a horrible job working at Area 51, and they would rhythmically shout at him and harass him, and that was a form of hypnosis. Do you remember that part? That was weird.
Oh yeah, that they were like conditioning him somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Like that he had been hypnotized, like by these rhythmic threats that they would make. I took down the actual quote that he said. Rhythmic shouting and constant threats. So he thought that was some kind of like psyop going on with him.
Interesting.
Or like something happening where
there is something weird going on there. It also reminds me of another connection to Alex Jones. It reminded me of that like very interesting boozy like podcast appearance that he made recently on YouTube, where he basically kind of like spilled the bean. And who can really know with Alex Jones, but he claimed to reveal that he found out years later that he was let into Bohemian Grove, and at least some faction of Bohemian Grove wanted him to film the cremation of care ritual and leak it to the public and like make it a thing. And he's not exactly sure why, but it's clear to him like somebody told him later that, yeah, like some of the insiders, like they obviously could have had you thrown out at any time. Like they knew who you were, but they wanted to let you in to like spread this kind of thing. And so it almost made me think, because like you said, Bob Lazar is the one who popularized Area 51 in the public conscious. And he went on local news. He didn't go on Coast to Coast first.
Yeah.
He went on like the local Las Vegas news as Dennis,
yeah.
you know, as like undercover. And then I think later he did go on Coast to Coast. But like the possibility that somebody within this vast, you know, secret government kind of military system wanted Bob Lazar to go out on TV and start saying this stuff for some reason, it's a tantalizing possibility that I think we shouldn't throw out.
If he, I mean, the only other possibility is that he's just a complete fraud, which, you know, maybe he could be. I mean, he doesn't, like, you know, he claims to have these degrees and, you know, there's no evidence of that. But, you know, Chomsky could have, like, deleted them from MIT or Caltech or whatever.
Yeah,
you know, we don't necessarily know, you know, but, yeah, definitely outside of the possibility that he's a total fraud, it would certainly seem that he was someone who was being set up to put this information out there. In the same, the same sort of general themes, even though there's differences in some ways between what he would say, like they're hazy enough that if you're not carefully, if you're not like squinting, if you're not like really, you know, or if you squint, I guess is the phrase, that if you squint, it seems pretty much like the same thing, you know, like that he was right all along, even if certain aspects of it seem like a little bit dissonant, like so maybe he was put out there. I mean, it does kind of raise the question, like, why hire this guy? Like, and also, where are the other S4 whistleblowers? How come they never came forward? Like, there was just enough, like, deniability that he would be ridiculed and seen as, like, someone not telling the truth, but, you know, be set up to be vindicated in some way, or maybe they didn't even plan on vindicating him. I don't know, but...
Yeah. Well, he did come back, you know, like, just in time for the New York Times 2017 thing.
Exactly,
that Netflix thing came out in 2018, so, like, right
Netflix,
after.
A huge platform that everyone watches. Yeah, exactly, right, yeah. With, like,
and they must have
super
been
well produced with Mickey Rourke, you know,
It must have been because they were, you know, the 2016 raid on his company, United Nuclear, you know, that was in 2016, and that was when they were filming the documentary. So they were filming this before the UFO did. It's not like they had the UFO thing come out and then were like, oh, we should go back and hit up Bob Lazar and, you know, make a documentary about him. They were already planning on kind of bringing him back out and putting him on, Netflix, this big platform founded by, like, Edward Bernays' nephew. I'm sorry, grandnephew. But anyways, so then he's out there right on time. He gets to go back on Joe Rogan. I remember listening to him and the filmmaker Corbell.
Jeremy Corbell.
Jeremy Corbell go on Joe Rogan at the time the movie came out, and it being like very frustrating. Jeremy Corbell was like very annoying and kept like jumping in to kind of control the kind of like answer for Bob whenever Joe Rogan would ask him a question. I think Joe Rogan even got a little bit like mad at him of like, let Bob talk, like stop, you know, jumping in with your like weird cosmic jujitsu energy and trying to like control, you know, I don't know. It just, it definitely gave me a little bit of a sus vibe from the filmmaker, which honestly the film does too. It's just very, like, I like how it opens with like not the title of the film, but wasn't it like it was something like Unbelievable Beliefs or something like that like was the first title card, and then it was like an Unbelievable Beliefs production.
Unbelievable Beliefs. I think it was like Extraordinary Beliefs.
Extraordinary Beliefs, it was like, are you ready to enter the world?
Beliefs.
It was like, are you ready to accept the world? Extraordinary Beliefs. And then like it flashes on the horizon, like Extraordinary Beliefs, and then like the movie starts. It was very weird. I guess that's his production company kind of title card. Is there going to be any
other follow-up? Yeah, exactly. Weaponize your curiosity with Extraordinary Beliefs.
He does want to weaponize your curiosity.
Lockyer Corbell. Oh, he also did Hunt for the Skinwalker. He did Patient 17, which was with Stephen Greer, I think. Wow, and he did one with John Lear, the disinherited heir to the Learjet, who also
he's an interesting character. I've heard him on radio shows back in the day. Very bizarre, like because he does seem to be
like a proto Bob Lazar, because he was out there before Bob Lazar talking about this type of thing, you know, and he the Learjet connection is very sus.
Yeah, and then he has another movie called The Anonymous Interview, highlighting an alleged ex-CIA operative who claims through his military and intelligence career to have been exposed to realities and technologies of an extraterrestrial nature. And then he made Nanoman Utility Fog, in which a military-funded nanophysicist claims to possess a mysterious metamaterial created by another intelligence. And then Patient 17, about a surgeon, the late Dr. Roger Leir, Leir, who claimed to remove alien implants, nanotechnology, microchips embedded by aliens monitoring the Earth. And yeah, then did basically the Hunt for the Skinwalker, which is based on a book by George Knapp, the guy who popularized Bob Lazar, and is still kind of, in that game and stuff. And yeah, the Skinwalker thing is interesting. There's also Skinwalker Ranch, which of course Bigelow bought, and for many years was trying to, I don't know, see if he could catch the magic in the bottle of like the dogmen running around or ETs. He allegedly kind of shut down his company that was investigating that stuff, but he kept the ranch. I think he might have sold the ranch more recently. I think that's kind of how it is, but I think he would take like Bob Lazar up there to like Skinwalker Ranch, and they were kind of hanging out in the early 90s because he told a story on Joe Rogan of riding around with George Knapp and Bob Lazar in like 1991.
The Mormon guy is the current owner. The Mormon guy is the one who Robert Bigelow said to, Brandon Fugel or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, and Robert Bigelow is an interesting guy. I know that like Ed Opperman always points out that, he's like this big deal dude in Las Vegas who became a real estate and kind of hotel kingpin in Vegas. But I remember Opperman would always say that, his hotel chain is the Budget Suites of America, that is kind of like an extended stay apartment kind of hotel complex thing. And Opperman always said like that is like those are seedy places where there's like a lot of like drug dealing, prostitution, kind of just like sketchy activity. So he's like kind of a slumlord basically. And that's how he made his initial money. And he did tell some weird... I was waiting throughout the interview, and, forgive me, everyone, if I didn't listen to the end and reveal this, but I was, like, waiting for him to say, well, when I was 12, I got a call on the phone from an ET that, like, blah, blah, blah. Because it sounds exactly like this is the type of guy. He did say that his parents had a close encounter when in, like, the late 40s, when he was, like, a baby, and they, I guess, told him about that. And so he always had this kind of interest in it. He also said that he had kind of like this master plan from the time he was a child that he was going to go out and start this big business and make a bunch of money so then he could turn around and spend all this money on this kind of stuff, like hunting for UFOs and skinwalkers and, sus light beings and stuff. And I guess that's like exactly what he did, which it's just like, was he a gifted child? I don't know, but it's very... Yeah, at age 12, it says here on his Wikipedia, at age 12, he decided that his future lay in space travel, despite his limitations in mathematics, and he resolved to choose a career that would make him rich enough that one day he could hire the scientific expertise required to launch his own space program. And, like that... As far as I know, Bigelow... doesn't say anything about his family and, like, where they came from, but that's kind of a very specific vibe for like a 12-year-old to have that in like let's see 1945.
Although kids
so he
do love space,
and especially in that era, like 1957, this would have been kind of day the earth stood still and all that stuff, but to decide that not only that's what I want to do with my life, but I want to build a real estate empire just because it's like the fastest, most efficient way to get rich. And then I can run off and start doing all this stuff. It's like, it's very oddly driven.
In April 2016, Bigelow's Beam module was launched in the International Space Station. The Bigelow Expandable Activity Module, aka the Beam. I'm sure this isn't a big hologram projector that will shoot a false messiah into the sky.
Yeah.
But,
a beam. No, I think, was he talking about that? He's been developing, as of now, a living module, basically, for
that's what it is.
Space travel.
It's an expandable habitat. Yeah, it's expandable habitat. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, he did say to the New York Times, he was absolutely convinced that aliens exist. and have visited Earth. And then, in June 2020, what does he do? He founds the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies to support investigations into life after death. And in January 2021, he put up a reward of $1 million for anyone who could demonstrate the existence of a life after death.
Yeah, it was weird because it was like an essay contest. Like, what essay are you going to write? But, so, in terms of Bob Lazar, like, the interesting thing about this, well, there's many interesting things about this to me. Well, for one, let's go back to this, like, element thing. Element 115, because I'm taking issue with the idea that like he predicted anything about this element necessarily. Like, yes, he predicted that there would be an 115th element, but I don't know if it has the same properties. Like, he said that you could irradiate it and then it would produce its own anti-gravitational field that would propel UFOs. Like, that's not like how it works. In fact, it's like a very unstable element that
it has a really short half-life
version of it. Yeah, exactly. That's why it took so long to discover it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yeah,
And I actually found this is it kind of reminds me of Fritz Springmeier, honestly, who was like, I don't know, the son of a USAID guy and got arrested on like weird federal charges in the 90s after publishing his, Illuminati handbook to create an undetectable mind-controlled sex slave. And, kind of a sketchy guy. But, Bob Lazar, there's an interesting Vice article, I just put it in the workflowy for you, that talks about the strange circumstances of him actually getting raided in 2016 at United Nuclear.
Oh, yeah, this is about the thallium thing.
Yeah, this gets into it. And it's bizarre.
And he actually has past ones that are super weird because they involve like the ex-KGB spy that died. Like, there have been multiple incidents where he's like had brushes with law enforcement. Yes.
He got involved with an ex-KGB guy?
Well, he was selling, like, the chemical that was used, like, to kill some ex-KGB dude at some point.
Oh, you mean Alexander Litvinenko?
I believe
so, polonium?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yes.
That's very weird.
He was selling the same radioactive poison used to kill him. Even this Vice article talks about it.
But I noticed that, there's a weird, because I noticed that Bob Lazar got arrested in 1990 for aiding and abetting a prostitution ring, and it was reduced to felony pandering, to which he pleaded guilty and was ordered to do community service, stay away from brothels, and undergo psychotherapy. So, not trying to kink shame, but also kind of odd, I guess, like aiding and abetting a prostitution ring. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, what? And he had to undergo psychotherapy and stay away from brothels. Like,
yeah, I mean, they're kind of legal. They're kind of legal in Nevada, so it's a little bit like you'd have to be doing something extra than just going to a legal brothel to get like arrested for aiding and abetting a prostitution ring. It's kind of, I don't know. But then there's another thing that this Vice article does kind of get into, because he claimed that the reason they raided him is because he suggested that he had a piece of
the documentary. This is funny because he did obviously like heavily imply it, but like it was really like Jeremy Corbell, like you remember that scene, Jeremy Corbell was like asking him like, did they raid you because you have element 115 here in your apartment?
When he's
like,
in the forest,
whatever,
and they go like bury their phones or something, and they're like, all right, now you can talk about it.
I feel like they were in his apartment or something, but he kept saying like, no, I don't feel comfortable talking about it. Like, no, we're not talking about that. Like I won't say that I have it, or something like that. Like, which is odd because he kept also saying like the reason why he came forward was for insurance, by coming forward that would protect him from being killed, which I find to be kind of silly. Like that's another suspicious thing about him, which is that like if he really were like a threat, to the FBI and they were raiding him because he has 115 or trying to shake him down or threaten him, like they would probably just kill him if they wanted to. I mean, they're like, Sergei Molenhas, the Bluebeam guy, or Phil Schneider, like they died under mysterious circumstances.
Gary Caradori, Gary Webb, Danny Casolaro,
John F. Kennedy, like
John
literally,
Lennon.
like. Yeah, Yasser Arafat, like literally, like
Hugo Chavez.
If Bob Lazar died under mysterious circumstances, like people would probably be like, "What? Yeah, the government killed." Or Jeffrey Epstein is a perfect example, where everyone knows that he was murdered, and yet nothing is being done about it. If it was really such a big problem, like they could easily just kill this guy,
or done something even more extreme to like really ruin his credibility, or I mean, of course, he says he was kind of harassed and persecuted, but
yeah,
they could have done
or
worse to
whatever.
him.
Like, well, he didn't stop, so like, why didn't they follow through on their threats, or if they were serious? Like,
no, for sure. But okay, but there's a weird twist here with that raid that I just want to read a little bit from in this Vice article that has to do with like this piece of element 115 from Area 51. It might not have. Okay. So it says conspiracy theorists, Vice, and Lazar himself have suggested that Lazar stole a piece of element 115 from Area 51 and that he has it to this day. The only presently known form of moscovium has a half-life of 0.65 seconds and would thus have decayed very quickly. Nevertheless, the thinking is that the government wants it back, which is why law enforcement raided Lazar's business. However, according to months' worth of incident reports obtained by Motherboard, the 2016 raid on United Nuclear was part of an ongoing and extensive murder investigation that includes state, local, and federal authorities. The documents make no mention of element 115. According to reports written by Michigan State Police Sergeant Detective Thomas Rajala, the events leading up to the search of United Nuclear began in late 2015 with the mysterious death of 31-year-old Janelle Struzel. Rajala says doctors concluded Struzel was poisoned and died of, quote, thallium toxicity. Colorless, odorless, and tasteless, thallium sulfate has been described as, quote, the poisoner's poison due to the substance's high toxicity and difficulty to detect. Thallium is most often used in the manufacture of electronics, as well as in glass manufacturing and the pharmaceutical industry. When isolated, it looks like tin. Thallium is a regular topic of conversation among elements collectors who try to obtain samples of as many elements in the periodic table as possible. According to Michigan State Police reports and United Nuclear Scientific's website, Lazar's company sells thallium, and the police search was intended to learn more about who he'd sold the material to. Lazar is not specifically listed as a suspect in the murder in the police documents, and I guess, there's a police report here that basically they were asking about who he sold it to, and he said he would cooperate with them. And I guess, according to the report, Lazar said sometime in March 2017, a woman provided him with her deceased brother's element collection, which Lazar agreed to sell through his website. According to the report and Lazar, thallium was indeed one of the elements in this collection. Thallium is something we never carried before and was just recently donated to us by the family of an element collector that died, so we now had a collection of some unusual materials we've never had before, Lazar said in an interview. Because the case is still an active investigation, some names and details are redacted. MSP reports suggest the police believe one of their subjects may have purchased materials used in Struzel's murder from Lazar. The documents note that investigators obtained search warrants for a suspect's Google, Yahoo, and Bing search results and seized computers and other data from a suspect. Shortly after obtaining information about those internet searches, investigators decided they wanted to question Lazar. And the report indicated that local and state police traveled to several areas in Michigan to conduct interviews. During the same time frame, it's noted, quote, efforts will be made to contact and interview Bob Lazar in person regarding any thallium sales, specifically to Redacted. Rajala goes on to say in his report that a police officer had recently discovered United Nuclear advertises thallium for sale on its website. They had a screenshot confirming that. And yeah, indeed, it does sell custom-made safety-sealed epoxy discs of thallium. It says the website says they do not require any sort of special handling or storage, and they can be discarded with normal trash if no longer needed. And I guess, I don't know. Like, basically, Corbell, told the British Express that we believe the official intent of the raid was a cover story, that they were looking for a piece of the fuel source for the extraterrestrial craft Lazar once worked on for the United States government at Area 51. Awesome. And, it's part of, like, he's a targeted individual because he's a reluctant UFO messiah and yada, yada, yada. Yes. I mean, I don't know. Right. Like, okay. That's... I guess he wasn't the target in the murder investigation. It kind of sort of makes sense, but I guess, I don't know. I guess they never arrested anybody. Never heard of it. So, yeah, I don't know. Could it be a cover? But yeah, I think you're right that, like, the Element 115, well, it does have some similarities, like the form that they ended up kind of proving in an experiment and discovering is not quite the same thing that it sounded like he was describing.
Yeah, definitely not.
I wouldn't give it to him as a slam dunk.
Different.
Like, he's been vindicated 100%.
No, me neither.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily also say 100% like, oh, totally bullshit. But again, it makes me wonder, how was he, like, just like who let Alex Jones into Bohemian Grove? Who let Bob Lazar go on TV and say this stuff and still lets him run around? And now he's kind of just part of this mix of very sketchy people from very particular high status and access backgrounds, you could say, who seem to be very oddly invested in all this stuff and are planning something about it. And Bob Lazar is their reluctant UFO messiah who predicted it, so they can go back in history now.
Yeah, he creates a historical narrative. Yes, exactly. Like, oh, how dare you, this poor man who was, just benighted and mocked and ridiculed for speaking truth, just like Leslie Kean, etc., who had to put up with the UFO people and everything, and these, fools.
I mean, her family has to put up with the UFO people and the 9/11 people. Oh, it's so hard to keep up with all these conspiracies that they're involved in.
Yeah.
It's so hard. Yeah. But you also mentioned that you wrote down this one Bob Lazar quote from the documentary. The main thing for me is the suppression of advanced technology and science. Yes, there's a whole other civilization out there, but that's another issue. And you wrote LMAO, what the fuck?
Yes, I think that is, hearing that was baffling to me, because to say, like, the main thing is government's keeping technology from us, which is much more trivial, I would think. Like, you wouldn't even need to have, like, aliens or whatever, UFOs involved. But he was making it sound like they're hiding advanced technology, and he literally said like this, this is the main thing for me is this. Yes, there's a whole other civilization out there, but that's extra.
That's exactly what the phenomenon attitude bizarre. Kind of was. That it led you right up to the point. Pass the buck,
kick the can down the road of like having to deal with this whole implication that is always being made that there are these ETs that are flying these craft, and that is like, it's getting incredibly sus.
Yeah, and now they're inching us up to the level of getting us, primed for the idea that there has been intelligent, meaningful contact. And that's a whole can of worms of, I don't know. It also made me think a little bit, if we're trying to think of maybe just, play a...
And they, like, another thing that's also changed, if you think about, like, why now? Another thing that has changed, I'm not trying to sound crazy. I know it sounds a little bit crazy and a little bit like, diehard blue beam maniac, but they do now have the ability to fake it. They really could fake it, like, well.
And if people get Neuralinks into their head, all bets are kind of off. They really are.
Yeah, that's true.
Once you can mimic
at that point,
ecstatic visions.
I almost feel like the point of the aliens would be to get us to put the Neuralinks in our heads, because at that point, like, once we have the Neuralinks, then all bets are off. If you have a microchip in your brain, but
we're being like primed for the chicken factory right now. But they
really could fake it. Like in a Watchmen or Architects
like gigantic squid attack kind of thing, Gigantic squid attack.
Could. They could do it well.
And that's the kind of thing, like, it feels like it would be such an opportunity, kind of like 9/11, where, I don't know if you've been following some of the threads people have been making recently, but I'm actually coming more around to the idea that, like, the destruction of the building may have been planned by the Rockefellers, like, from the moment it was built. It was a 30...
Yeah.
No, because actually... Wait a minute.
It was a ritual complex. Okay. It was a massive ritual complex.
Yes, I remember, because I found a video somebody had posted on Twitter. I wish it was Thomas Kean who had said this, but it was Bob Carey, who I think was one of the other heads of the 9/11 Commission. And I think it was like one of these 2000s 9/11 truther guys kind of asking him questions about, like, but like, we need to get to the bottom of all this stuff. And like, there was something more going on. And then near the end, he's kind of like being a little like condescending and like, yes, I agree. There were things that we didn't get to, kind of like a UFO, like, Harry Reid would talk about UFOs of like, yes, I agree. There's some real serious stuff, but he's kind of hedging and not saying. And then at the end, he throws in this weird comment. He says, look, it was a 30-year plan. what do you want me to do about it? And the guy was like, no, I'm talking about 9/11. I'm not talking about like, you know, the JFK. And he's like, no, I'm talking about 9/11. And then he's like, I gotta go, see ya. And like that's the end of like the conversation. But it's like, wait, what? Like that it was a 30-year plan. And then I looked it up, and basically the conception and like the beginning of the construction and everything of the World Trade Center was like 1971 was smack dab in the middle of it. And so it's like, ooh, like, you know, it just makes you really wonder, you know, how long do they plot?
Very Bane-pilled take.
Right? And well, then if the Rockefeller brothers, you know, one of whom confessed, bragged basically openly, you know, I think in the 90s or the 2000s about the success of his New World Order conspiracy, and then Nelson Rockefeller, who like almost became president, and then Laurance Rockefeller, who's the reincarnated pharaoh of Atlantis, who was the one person pretty much bankrolling the UFO movement in the 1990s and was like instrumental behind the scenes, bringing Bill and Hillary Clinton out to Jackson Hole to like psyop them about UFO reality and all this shit. Then like, yeah, no shit they would do that about with the World Trade Center. And then also no shit they would do this. Like, you know, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's quite terrifying. But then the idea that just like 9/11, that, you know, like the other thing I was seeing like in this thread along with that video was like all of the advertisements and there was like a thing of Cookie Monster like stomping around like King Kong, like taking I think he might have even been taking a bite out of the World Trade Center, and like I think it was the bicentennial episode in like 1976 or something of like, yeah, like Sesame Street magazine. He was like taking a bite at the World Trade Center. And then all these 90s commercials, all these disaster movies that we've talked about and the whole Dracularity thing, but also just like weird like Levi's commercials or other things like that, or things like the Coos album cover, which shows the World Trade Center exploding, that was going to come out. I can't remember if it was going to come out on 9/11 or if it came out like months before 9/11, but either way, very bizarre. And all those things. Right. And so now it's like, are we being primed for an alien 9/11? Basically now that it's like all the groundwork has been laid. When you first said that you
were coming around to an idea, I thought you were going to say that you were coming around to holographic planes, because I've been seeing people like revisiting the holographic planes on Twitter recently, where like showing the video of the plane like melting into the, and I was like, oh, but yeah, I guess you're still a hard skeptic on holographic planes.
I'm still a real planer. I'm still a real planer.
Yeah,
they could have been drone planes. Yeah, they could have been drone planes, but I do believe they're real. You know, it just seems a little too wacky. You could fly by wire. You could remotely hijack them. The hijackers didn't even need to know how to fly a plane. They just needed to hold box cutters and be patsies. You know, so that's what they were down in Florida being taught. So, you know, you probably could have done that by 2001. You could have remotely guided. Because do you want to leave that to chance that, you know, you're going to give some guy who couldn't fly a Cessna to hit a bullseye and then you hit 3 out of 3 targets, basically.
Well, I didn't have to hit a bullseye. Oh, I guess this is the, like, you had to hit the exact offices to destroy the files, like, theory.
Well, no. I'm just saying in general. I'm saying in general, like, they got good direct hits on those towers, and that's, like, I think a thing that, you know, you're going on manual pilot mode, a big jetliner, you're not a jet pilot, that could be difficult. Like, you could, it sounded like some of these people.
I feel like I could hit those towers, I think
maybe,
I could hit
but
them.
you couldn't do the descending corkscrew. You know? You couldn't do the 270-degree corkscrew descending turn to hit the Office of Naval Intelligence and kill everybody inside. That pilot couldn't do it, and we couldn't either. So there's something a little bit, you know, sus about that. I wouldn't rule out cruise missile, but you know, I think that still, getting back to what's ahead of us, it's a little bit unsettling.
On a, you know, just to entertain the possibility of, you know, it being a less fully formed 30-year plan, you know, there definitely was like a notion that was out there, as we talked about, of the Twin Towers being destroyed. You know, there was something about them that suggested the potentiality of their destruction, like inherently. And it's a similar thing with the aliens, where there's just been all this predictive programming for all these years, where, you know, we just, like, the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you know, all that stuff, like, we've always been, like, it's something that has been going on for a long time and building, and the idea in our consciousness has been cultivated, and yeah, I don't know.
I hate to say it, but these people are postulating that Henley lied and that indeed they are here. They've been coming for at least 10,000 years. And, we have to bow down and worship them.
No, but I'm going to take Henley. I'm going to take a stand with Don Henley on this one. I'm going to agree with him despite, his various antics as chronicled in the Eagles episode that we disproved of. I think that he's correct that this whole, and Jacques Vallée, who's kind of in with all these people, said the same thing, that these cults could be used and that they, regardless of the reality of the phenomenon, these UFO believers could be weaponized, and for lack of a better word, they could be applied to some purpose. This, for instance, the idea of a universal economy or whatever,
and talk about a great reset.
Talk about it in our Mothman episode. Yeah,
talk about a great reset, a great ontological, existential reset to reframe. Talk about changing. It's almost like they want to.
That's going to be a new weapon in the arsenal of the anti-religious front, where they're going to be you really still believe in that dusty old book when you have these aliens out there, when the space brothers are here. Why don't you go to the great temple of enlightenment that the Greys set up with the help of the Bigelow Institute and learn something for real from whatever.
Whatever the Grey equivalent of the Jesuit missionaries is, they're going to go flock to them and, onto their missions.
There's going to be the same way there's spiritualist churches all over Massachusetts still, there's going to be Greyist churches popping up.
Well, you know what though? Doesn't it kind of sound like maybe a group of people are trying to change the dominant images of man at this juncture?
Yes. Yeah, well, exactly, because, just like Mickey Rourke said in the documentary, you're not the center of the fucking universe, I hate to break it to your fucking goddamn ass, but it's not all about you. You're not the hero in this fucking world,
He's so sus. What is up with him?
Yeah,
I don't know.
It was just so corny how he wouldn't stop cursing like a Tarantino character, and sometimes they would do this weird audio doubling thing where he would say one version of the line where every other word was fuck, and then one version of the line where he didn't curse, and layer them over each other to give you that spooky effect,
cool.
But yeah, so cool, yeah. But no, exactly, it's the whole thing of these anthropocentric religions, heavens.
And it does, it totally...
I'm down with dolphins, I think we need to reach out to our cetacean brothers and everything, I'm open to that, but, we are human beings.
Yes.
It's just how it is. Our experience is anthropocentric because we are anthropos insofar as such a thing is a valid concept, which it tends to be. It's hard to get away from it, because we certainly have this, even if we somehow enter into a human dolphin gray civilization, there would still be the long history of human civilization that would bind us together under the concept of human, such that it would, be still entrenched and still a valid category of analysis. So,
yes.
Whatever, I digress, but the whole idea of, these silly, dusty old books with the human beings being the center of the universe, you are the center of your own universe. You are the center of your life and your experience. Everything is kind of pivoted around you. Look at your perceptions. It's a 360-degree thing where, that's how phenomenality is configured. We live in a world where we're thrown into being,
It's weird how they're kind of advocating for that, but then also denying that in this kind of weird way, because they are kind of, I think at the end of the day, it's this weird kind of hybrid.
Well, yeah, I mean, they want you to be the center of your own universe in terms of I meant that in terms of it's natural that we use a humanness as a frame of reference to a point.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have an experience of humanity, whatever that is, that is probably part of our phenomenal experience. But they
sure.
do have a sort of hyper individualism and like Robert
Heinlein
yourself,
shit,
man. Like, don't worry about having a community. Like, don't listen to these to the mullahs, in Iran flying their drones to make you think there's a UFO, there's a based UFO. Listen to the real UFOs.
But they do kind of want us to be like Neuralinked Borg bugmen working in the chicken factory at the same time. So it's like they have to do this delicate dance of that they want to collectivize society in a way so that they can kind of confidently manage it and control it. And basically deny the vast majority of people of like kind of real human agency or subjugated to these like mechanisms of control, both ideological and technological, that they're kind of
right. Well, it's the old thing of like the old dialectic of submission and freedom, where it reminds me of when like giving up your security for freedom. We talked about this I think before on the podcast. Like, well, if you're at that point, then usually it's because you feel that in giving up your security for freedom, like you're not really giving up freedom because your lack of security is making it so you can't actually like actualize your freedom at all. So you don't actually feel free because whatever force is threatening your security. So this whole
it's like
thing
if you're living
like,
in a city that doesn't have an anti-fascist protection barrier and there's fascist West German saboteurs coming over and stealing all your best workers and sabotaging your factories, maybe you need to build a wall a little bit. But it's kind of interesting is like the no borders thing gonna also be applied to aliens. Like if you're against these aliens, you're like Trump. You want to build a wall and keep people out.
Yeah, well, I guess Robert Bigelow has said that they're illegal immigrants in a way because they're all at the supermarket. Wow, they're all at the supermarket buying our groceries.
Not paying taxes.
And they're not even citizens. Well, maybe they do pay.
Maybe they do.
I don't know. Well, do they have social security numbers? I don't know. It's an interesting question.
But
maybe they swap existence with people. Like maybe they're walk-ins where they inhabit people's bodies like that. I don't know.
Yeah. All I know is that I looked up all of Laurance Rockefeller's children because that's how I roll, and I think almost all of them are involved with kind of green energy, environmental kind of stuff like that. Like they're all kind of like like Larry Laurance Rockefeller Jr. has worked for the Natural Resources Defense Council, which is an environmental advocacy group, and is a trustee. He stated that his family all shared an interest in environmental matters. Like the fucking oil kings. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Anyways, they. Let's see. So, they basically, the American Conservation Association, the Palisades Interstate Park Commission. So, kind of just maybe not super high.
The Atlantis Resurrection Society.
Raising Atlantis. I guess if the sea levels rise, we'll never raise Atlantis. So, it's
true,
they really got to get it going. So then, the other child, and we'll have to do a whole Rockefeller thing one day and like really get into this. But Lucy Aldrich Rockefeller Waletsky is still around. She is an American philanthropist and environmentalist, and was friends of the Rockefeller State Park Reserve, the National Audubon Society. Kind of like nothing really, really big. But then there's Laura Rockefeller Chasson, I think, or formerly Laura Spellman Rockefeller, the eldest child.
Does he only have daughters, or does he have any sons?
No, he had a son. He had Laurance Jr. Yeah, he had Laurance Jr.
Oh, right.
And she actually got into, this is a little bit, she became a psychiatrist after going to Bryn Mawr and Harvard, and served on the boards of the Rockefeller Family Fund, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Spelman College, and also on the boards of the Children's Defense Fund, the Conflict Management Group, and the Institute for Faith and Politics, and on the steering committee of the Common Ground Network for Life and Choice. I don't know what that means. Is that a pro-life or anti-life?
I don't know. Life and choice sounds like
life. Maybe it's like a middle of the road. Oh,
it's like a way of like reclaiming. Being
no, it is.
pro-life,
she's described as a radical centrist, not in the way Oglesby was,
awesome.
But so there's that, and then actually, interestingly, Then there's Marion Rockefeller Weber, who actually is based out of San Francisco and is a philanthropist through her Flow Fund and is founder and director of the Arts and Healing Network, which gives the prestigious Most Outstanding Healing Artist for the Year award annually. She's quoted as saying, Arts and Healing Network honors and supports the emergence of healing artists and recognizes them as essential catalysts for positive change. She currently resides in the San Francisco Bay Area. Sounds like Lisa Kleypier. That's some sus shit right there. Sounds like Snow White 7-Eleven I am. So, yeah, and another thing we'll come back to just very briefly that I discovered that made me chill today is they're all buried in, like, this huge plot at the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in New York. And I just looked through the list of people that are buried there, and it's, like, the who's who, basically. Like, Andrew Carnegie's there, Henry Sloan Coffin, who I think was a mentor to the Jarecki brothers' dad, who was friends with Epstein. David Crosby's dad is buried there. We got the Dodge family. The Hamiltons are buried there. Washington Irving, naturally. The list basically goes on to, like, these are the old blue bloods. And I forget if we mentioned recently, or if somebody else had said to me, about kind of the weird, kind of obscure upstate New York thing. Oh, you know what? No, it was a new movie that's on Netflix as well that I was going to bring up to you. I think it was called, like, Things Seen and Heard. It's a very interesting film about, it's kind of like a haunted house kind of, but also like it's kind of very like A24 kind of alt horror kind of movie, but a huge plot point in it because they move up to a little university town in the Hudson River Valley near Sleepy Hollow, and everybody in the town for some reason is a Swedenborgian. And they all regularly have seances, and they talk about how, like, people have lived here for a long time. There's a lot of ghosts up here, and, like, we're in Sleepy Hollow country or something like that. And then at one point, they figure out that there are ghosts haunting their house, and they have, like, a seance where basically it, like, appears to them, and it's like but it's kind of like a low-key pro-Swedenborgian pro-communing with spirits movie. Like, not to spoil everything, but the spirits end up not being the main antagonist. They're actually chill and helpful. And the Swedenborgians know this, and all this other stuff. So interesting kind of thing for Netflix to be putting out, But it made me did make me think of, like, oh yeah, Sleepy Hollow, Ichabod Crane. There is a kind of creepy, ooky, spooky. You usually think about that with Massachusetts and stuff, but not so much with, like, New York, like upstate New York. But it is sus. And then I find out there's this
Irving stuff.
and then this legendary cemetery, which is, like, basically where, like, it's adjacent to the graveyard where the legend of Sleepy Hollow is set, basically. The old Dutch church of Sleepy Hollow. All of, like, the American industrial age, like, bourgeoisie, and a lot of older families, from the Astors to the Rockefellers to, the Coffins, Hamiltons, etc., to the Carnegies, are all buried there together, which is a little weird, right? Like, it's just a little.
Yes.
I wonder if I don't know if the Keans are buried here, but maybe they are. Who can really say? But it's a kind of it's a little dark for, like, the Rockefeller family to all be like, yeah, we want to be buried in the sussest cemetery, like, ever. Even though I don't know, I'd have to really. I was actually under the impression that the Rockefellers are kind of like the Bushes. Like, if you really go deep enough, they're a little bit like New Money. But actually, no, not really, because they moved to America in the early 1700s. They were from Germany, so they did have some deep roots, but not necessarily like, oh, it was the founder of the Puritan colony or whatever. I don't think they had extreme wealth until, John D. Rockefeller necessarily. But that's a question for another day. Bottom line, all these people are sus, and, like, and I'm not looking forward to whatever they have cooked up for us. But do not believe the blue beam. Don't believe it.
No.
Don't believe the sus religion.
To go back,
roll out.
Yeah, to go back to my exactly. It's basically the same stuff we see with Changing Images of Man and everything, where it's gonna be presented as the ultimate freedom, but really, like, that's why submission to Allah, Islam, is the ultimate freedom, because when you're in the abyss of total freedom at the mercy of all the Jan and the Greys, then you're going to cling to whatever lamppost or whatever in the storm, you know, port, you're going to, whatever port in the storm, or I don't know what the, I'm looking for some kind of metaphor here, but it's eluding me.
Shelter from the storm, you know. Bob Dylan probably found it the hard way.
You're gonna cling to, you know, whatever lamppost you can grab while you're being whipped around in the UFO winds, and it's gonna be like, you know, the church of Grayism and ectoplasm and what X-wing, Boeing holograms. So, you know,
they could even, I wonder how much they could tease it out for everybody by not releasing a lot of information, but then saying we did find something and it's confirmed, but it's like it's too sensitive and like we don't know enough, we can't tell you, and then to let people's imaginations kind of run wild. And then if you have the media really going buck wild for it and kind of making it this big exciting thing, you could definitely see people. I mean, there's like Zoomers on TikTok that like create like Harry Potter tulpas to like
shifting
have
realities.
With
Right. They shift realities. Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Like,
I mean, honestly, like we could just say that like, what if Don Lemon was like, so to talk to the Space Brothers, what you have to do is shift realities. So here's what you do. You make sure that you hydrate, you know, you listen to a playlist that puts you in the gray mentality. And you know, before you sleep, you write down your intentions, like to have sex with a gray, you know, or what you're like, and that's how you shift realities. It
was just like anything in that even keel said with a level of seriousness.
I mean, that's basically what you're describing. Basically, already has happened, where like a lot of people are like, yeah, it's real. The UFOs are out there. You know, even these, like I said, even in the comments, even the TrueAnon simps are like saying like, no, Liz, no, it's real. Like, and the like one guy was like, progressives better get out in front of this. You know, we need to be at the forefront of this UFO stuff or whatever. Like, so I really, people are already like based on nothing. Just like a little bit of ginnery here and there are going all in. So yeah, that has already happened and is going to continue, barring any kind of like Disney, Boeing, UFO like show that may or may not occur in our skies at any time in the future.
Exactly. But we're going to keep digging to see who's really behind all this and what the hell are they after. I feel like we're getting a little warmer.
Phanes, aka Protagonos, coming out of the wind egg. That's what eggs, like phantom eggs without yolks, are called, by the way. Wind eggs. Sounds a little bit like
a flying
what these things
egg.
Are, you know?
Oh my god.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. It's suggestive. You know, that's what Protagonos came out of, like an egg kind of laid by the aether. You know, sometimes thought of as being the winds, sometimes as fire, sometimes thought of as kind of a fiery element, although. You know, really it is more of the wind. But yeah, the wind egg, the hollow egg, just like a little egg with a bunch of seeds inside for tiny little grays.
Wait, hold on. Remember
fairy eggs?
Remember Mork and Mindy from the 70s? Wasn't like in the intro to that, like Robin Williams was an alien who came out of an egg?
I don't remember.
I think he was. I think he literally was. And I always kind of remember that being like a weird kind of signature of that show. I mean, if you want to really go predictive programming.
I'm looking at it right now. No. His ship is like, it's a spaceship that is an egg. What? No! Stop it. And then he killed himself.
Yeah, he killed himself. Yeah, folks.
And
some
that's
dark
why.
Shit. And he was up in, you know, he's a San Francisco native.
He knew.
Yeah, he was probably around with all these people. Then you think, I mean, how much of that was like Third Rock from the Sun that we mentioned? Alf was an alien, like a weird, like weasel alien kind of thing, and there's a lot of that. I mean, you know, going on. I'll leave you with one final question: was the gobbledygooker predictive programming?
Oh, wow! Oh my god! And you know what? And it was the same thing where they just kept insisting that he had won the Heart of Hartford.
Oh my god! He was in Hartford.
No.
He won the Heart of Hartford. Oh my god. Oh my god. He did win the Heart of Hartford, I bet. in their rituals when they summon the gobbledygooker.
No.
The weird Jin E.T., the gobbledygooker, the principals of the Hartford Fire Insurance Company and Aetna summoned him in their theosophical ritual, and he won their hearts.
Yeah.
That's my hot take.
It was very much, the whole audience was Psyop because they were all incredibly disappointed but they kept insisting that he had won the Heart of Hartford, so like we were basically like forced to accept the gobbledygooker because you'd already.
It feels like a really potent metaphor for what we might be facing in the near future. Like the announcers are like Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon, and they're like, "Oh my God, folks, we got ourselves a gobbledygooker."
Yeah,
Like, so they're hyping so hard, but just like nobody cares.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly, and the crowd, maybe that was the early test run. They're like, something's off about this gobbledygooker. We have to workshop this better. The people really didn't react to it how we wanted.
I'm just reading the description of the gobbledygooker on Wikipedia right now, which is so funny. Like, Guerrero climbed out of the costume. He then approached Okerlund for an interview, but spoke only by making turkey noises. This prompted Okerlund to call him the gobbledygooker. As fans and attendants of the Hartford Civic Center started to boo, a rock and roll rendition of Turkey in the Straw began to play, and Okerlund and Guerrero danced in the ring. Despite the crowd's rejection of the segment, commentator Roddy Piper said the gobbledygooker had won the Heart of Hartford.
Wait, okay, there's so much going on there. So the guy who starred in They Live was the color commentator. I didn't even realize that. That he was. Oh my God. And on top of that, he was a Thanksgiving turkey at the end of the day, and he was in Hartford, which is a reference to the Puritans who founded the Connecticut colony that were running Hartford. Oh my God.
And Leslie Kean's ancestor, Robert Winthrop, Winthrop, whatever, the founder of Massachusetts Bay Colony. John Winthrop? I forget what his first name was.
Winthrop, yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. So, I mean, that was a real subliminally loaded symbolic ritual that happened. It was a Thanksgiving turkey.
Yeah, a harvest festival, and the ultimate harvest is going to be like the false rapture that happens.
Did that happen on like the autumnal equinox or something?
Or
Halloween, maybe? Because it might have happened around Thanksgiving.
November 27th was... Oh, no, that was his last appearance. His first appearance was during Survivor Series of 1990. But when was the exact date? Come on, Wikipedia. It's not really... It was, Survivor Series of 1990.
When was Survivor Series 19? Well, it was that when he popped up in It was
Hartford? November 22nd, 1990. Yeah, Hartford, Connecticut. That was the...
Wait, November 22nd? 11/22?
No.
Oh my God, no. The anniversary of JFK's assassination, he truly did win the Heart of Hartford. And in 1990, who was president in 1990, Khalid?
He definitely approved of it. He signed off on this ritual, HW.
George H.W. Bush right there,
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And yes. I think at that same pay-per-view, Sergeant Slaughter appeared. That was when he did his heel turn and became like a Ba'athist, like Saddam Hussein sympathizer.
No.
This was exact. He insulted servicemen stationed in Iraq for Thanksgiving. Oh my God! Wow! Truly, the Survivor Series, the SS extravaganza is upon us.
Oh my God! Oh my God! We're living it again.
We're living it again. Damn. Exactly. Vince McMahon, he knew. Wow. Okay. Wow. I don't think we can top that, so I think we can leave it there for now.
On that note, I think we can wrap up. Yeah, watch out for the gobbledygooker. Watch out for... Yeah.
They won the Heart of Hartford, and now they want to win the heart of the entire world.
And he would only speak in gobbledygook, and he had to be interpreted. By Roddy Piper, the announcers. He couldn't speak. He was a strange turkey alien being.
It's almost like right? It's like as if he had the sunglasses that he could, but for listening instead. So he could transliterate what the gobbledygooker was saying in his alien language.
Yes, exactly.
There's a lot. Wow, the bravo to the writers of 1990 Survivor Series. They really packed a lot.
For laying the clues to decode the bluebeam psyop that we're now living through all these years later. Yeah.
Dear God. 11/22, 1990.
No.
Oh, God.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
All right.
that's where we're gonna leave it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Watch out.
Watch out. Just watch the fuck out. And yeah. Until next time, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.
Things are really heating up here at the Survivor Series, and I gotta tell you, these great fans here in Hartford, Connecticut are red hot too. And you know, when it's so hot, so long, well, that means that the incubation is all over. And that means a lot of us are looking forward to seeing this gigantic egg. Wherever that came from, I'm sure it had to hurt. But this egg is gonna hatch here tonight. As a matter of fact, hold on. This cracks me up. I can hear it starting to creak and crack right now. Everybody has speculated as to what might be in the egg. Is it a dinosaur? Is it a rabbit? Balloons? Is it the Playmate of the Month? Who knows? Well, the way it sounds to me right now, the speculating is all over. Oh, stand back. Oh, look at the cracks. I think that egg is ready to blow. Oh, there it is. What is it? What in the world? Oh, my God. What in the world is this?
I don't know what it is.
Take a look at it, ladies and gentlemen.
I know. You're looking at me like I don't know what it is.
A beak, a little rooster tail up on top. I don't know. You got a pair of legs like my mother-in-law, pal. Look at the feet on this thing. I can't believe. What in God's name is this? Holy. What? What is with the gobbledy? The gobbledygook. Ha! Don't tell me you're the gobbledygooker. You've got to be kidding me. Is that all you do is gobble? Well, on Thanksgiving, what would you expect? What? You want me to what? Oh, no. I wouldn't do that. Not in front of an audience like this.